One, two. Got to.
Opening question for this episode, because we are recording before the Super Bowl actually happened, so we don't know who won. But what artist would you invite to your Super Bowl party, and what would you serve?
So I thought a lot about this, and what I came up with, I focused on the word party, and I think I'm going to invite David Lee Roth, just because I know that even if the game is bad or the signal goes out or the commercials stink, we're still going to have a good time, and I'm going to be entertained.
There's going to be somebody like doing flips off your couch. And
exactly. Or he's going to be telling
20 feet in the air.
Exactly. He's going to be telling some random story about when he and Taylor Swift were breaking into a bank or something like that. It's completely fabricated, but it's still amazing to hear. As far as what I'd serve him, man, I don't think there's anything wrong with, just doing a straight up nacho bar, just loading him up, getting all the toppings out there and, letting him do his thing. And, I know you and I back in the day, we'd load him up with some chilies, some habaneros, some good stuff, and go for the spicy. And, even my dad's patented recipe, the culinary genius he is, of Doritos with the cheese melted on them and everything. And the white boy taco meat, just go simple with it, but have fun and, watch David Lee Roth do his own halftime show.
Yeah. So for a drink, would you be giving him like pop, something caffeinated, like an upper, or are you serving him, like hard drink, something that may slow him down?
Ooh, I'd probably research that just to see if he's like committed to being sober. Like, I'd hate to be that guy.
Yeah.
But like,
I feel like he may be.
He might be, but at the same time, that doesn't mean he can't have coffee or like, a big Red Bull punch or something ridiculous, or just keep the espressos coming all afternoon. Just because, I mean, you gotta, if you're gonna have David Lee Roth in your house for 3 hours, you want to have David Lee Roth in your house, not just some, old bum.
Absolutely. Well, you may have sharked part of my answer there. The answer I came up with was Billy Corgan and nachos as well, because we've got that famous concert clip of him in the middle of, I don't know if it's a drum solo or something, but it's a break where people basically got footage of him, like off to the side of an amp, and he's got like true plastic tray stadium nachos.
Oh, with the liquid cheese and everything.
Yeah. So I know if Billy Corgan comes over and I have, something that's going to beat the stadium nachos, like, he's going to be cool with it. Right.
Oh yeah.
And that's another person where, I looked it up, and he is into the NFL. He's everything Chicago, so he's a Bears fan, obviously. But even if we need to talk something else, we're going to be able to talk something else.
I mean, the dude's got a wrestling league. He's got his new show that, we'll talk about. I mean, apparently he's in a couple bands. I don't know. He plays some mean guitar.
Yeah, there's so I'm making a prediction here, but there's likely going to be a bunch of AI commercials, kind of like we had the crypto commercials. So we're probably going to need something to talk about like during those.
Yeah, good call. So are you gonna serve anything in particular tomorrow, or do up anything?
I don't have solid plans. I don't know if we're going to leave. I mean, we do have chips and stuff sitting around.
Hey,
I don't know. I feel like I'm going to wake up and be like, oh yeah, it's on. I better.
Yeah. No, I think I'm going to do up some cheesesteaks tomorrow, and just, kind of put my chips in on the the Eagles winning. Hopefully, Kansas City, good barbecue, nothing wrong there, but some Philly cheesesteaks.
That's a good idea. But there's a few places around me where I feel like I could get a Philly cheesesteak, and maybe, just to put the vibe on. That's a good idea.
Totally. I mean, they're going to need help from us, man.
Yeah, they will.
All right. Well,
we're going to talk it.
And some of this list is kind of absurd. And Patti Smith, she used the N-word. And it's a podcast and you will love it. It's the Indy 500.
I don't know if the better word is banger or slaps.
It's a
Thoughts?
hit.
Oh,
That's our brand new theme song by a person who may have been our literal first fan. I think I was talking to him about the podcast a little bit before it was an actual thing you could listen to. And I know he said he subscribed when we had just the little preview blurb on. But that was by a user on Blue Sky named Bear Jones 27. He didn't request any plugs or anything on time, but keep an eye out on the episode description. So if he's got a band or something else that he wants to link, we'll drop it there.
yeah, no, really appreciate that. Super fun. And, I saw on the
It
title of
was
the
really high quality.
yeah, and I'm kind of curious too as time evolves. This is the Patti Smith mix. I'm kind of curious over time to see if we're going to get little adjustments along the way lyrically.
I think the idea was that, I had talked to him a little bit about it, but it sounded like the idea was that it's going to be modular, where he can switch out the lyrics here and there. We'll see. I don't know, but that sounded like it. It sounded like something he was working on.
I love it.
But yeah, I do too.
Well, hey,
so cool.
Everybody out there, welcome to episode 3. This week we are discussing number 263, I believe it is, on the
number 263
Anime Top 500 list. That's Laura Marling's I Speak Because I Can. Before we do that, should we keep talking about football?
Let's keep talking about football. I bet people would love that.
Oh, yeah, there's no podcast talking about football this week, so I think we got the market cornered.
No, yeah, there's nowhere you can go for that kind of talk, so... But we promise we'll link it back to music, I guess, if we have to.
Oh, we'll get there.
Okay.
So I guess diving right into football. Let's talk about halftime shows. We got
there you go.
One on the docket tomorrow where Kendrick Lamar might drop the most watched diss of all time.
He may, in front of our eyes, ascend to hater Valhalla. I don't even know if that's the correct analogy there, because Valhalla is going to have other people in it. He's going to become the 2001 space baby of haters.
Pretty much.
Like he's going to if he does what we all expect him to do, he's gonna be a new kind of hater that we've never seen before.
I mean, they're pretty much going to rename the trophy at the Player Haters Ball after him after this one. And even if not, it's still going to be an amazing show. The guy is a hell of a performer. His music's great. Even whether or not he has any guests on, I mean, it's probably just going to be right up there with one of the best of the last 10, 15 years, I'm thinking. Yeah,
if he's got guests, he's keeping it under wraps pretty well. I mean, I guess they do every time, but usually you can get a sense of beforehand if they're gonna have guests, right?
You start, I mean, especially in today's day and age, you start getting a little bit of the internet whispers and all that stuff. And I know you were saying Tyler, the creator, was denying it, but I mean, we saw Andrew Garfield denying his Spider-Man cameo for so long, just to appear right on screen.
Denying it is something that you do these days. So
exactly, you got to do it. But so I'm thinking about it. I'm curious. I think we both know the answer to number 1. But if you had to pick 3 halftime shows that you'd say your favorite, what comes to mind for you?
So I'm going to go through a few just really quick, because I have one that I kind of wanted to go long form on. Speaking of not having guests, I really did like the Weeknd's halftime show. I think it was 2021. It was the COVID year, which may be the reason that he doesn't have guests. It's hard enough to get people on a plane and entourages and stuff like that. So I like that one a lot.
And he just ruled that year musically too, leading up to that point. So it was kind of almost just appropriate to be like, you ruled the pop charts, man. This is all yours. Have at it.
It's kind of it's the MVP award for the year usually, right?
Totally.
Another one. It actually wasn't a Super Bowl halftime, but I believe it was a Thanksgiving halftime that everybody goes back to, where it was Creed. I think everybody's pretty familiar with that one, but that's something we've looked back on. They've got like the flying like ribbon dancers as they're doing higher.
Scott Stapp had the Cowboys jersey on, and they
Mhm.
haven't. The franchise hasn't been the same since, really. I mean,
I think there's a number of things you can point to that may have
I'm gonna.
may have kicked off their demise, but I mean that's not one of them.
He's probably sure to land in like the top 10 on like Family Feud guesses at least. I mean,
Yeah.
that's just kind of asking to be cursed, if you ask me.
So the one I wanted to go a little bit more into, because I wanted to talk about the game, and the halftime artist. So I want to. So the year's 2008, and okay, you probably remember this one probably faster than I did. But in 2008, the New England Patriots were entering into the Super Bowl. They were already being called the greatest NFL team of all time. Right? Okay, they're undefeated through 16 games in a row, and they only have the Super Bowl to complete. And the team they're facing kind of entered the whole season unheralded, without much attention or faith, and they're led by an equally unheralded quarterback with Eli Manning and the Giants.
The New York Football Giants.
Yeah, they're a Tiffany franchise. So after kind of a rough start, the Giants that season managed to close out with a 10-6 record, which is not a 16-0 record. And even more ominously, the very last regular season game they played that year was against the Patriots, and obviously they lost. So that's setting up the scene of that game. And of course, that game's famous for the Giants' fourth quarter final drive. It includes the wide receiver David Tyree making the helmet catch on third down, which was a leaping one-handed catch that he pinned against his helmet and came down with for a first down on that final drive. And of course, they score on that drive and they win. So I'm teeing this up. Do you recall who the halftime artist was that year?
2008, huh?
Yeah, and I'm gonna admit I had totally memory hold it too. I didn't remember, but when I was looking through performances, I saw this one, and then I saw what year and what game it was, and I was like, I don't remember that at all.
Yeah, I'm probably not right, but my guess would be like Aerosmith or Nelly for some reason.
Really, really close. At least one of them was really close. It was actually Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. Was that year.
Okay, yeah.
It was actually kind of a kickoff for one of their own world tours. And reportedly the NFL had offered the spot to the Eagles, but they had turned them down. To everyone's benefit.
I mean, I hate the fucking Eagles, man, but I'll take Tom Petty.
I've named a particular musical bugaboo of mine after the Eagles, and what it is that there's a few bands out there who have a very large ratio between their songs that I like and then the rest of their songs. And I named it after the Eagles because they have 3 or 4 songs that I really, really like. And the entire rest of their catalog sounds like complete dog shit to me.
Yeah. Unified front on that one, my friend. I mean, I can live with the greatest hits album maybe in a car, but might be listening to only half the tracks.
Yeah. But the trick is the ones that I do like I really, really like. Like if they had one album where like, all 4 or 5 of these songs were on it, and then they, John Denvered, I'd be like, man, that was one of the best bands ever. But because they've had a full career, and I can go and I can listen to every single other song they made, I'm like, this band is terrible. But
more reunion concerts than regular concerts too, it seems like.
Yeah, that's another thing about the Eagles. So give me your halftime shows.
Yeah, so the ones that came to mind, 2002, country's kind of, still reeling a little bit emotionally from 9/11, and that was the year that U2 played the halftime show, and it was just kind of a tribute to all the victims of 9/11. And if you want like an emotional, intense performance, I mean, call Bono, call U2. Those guys were on top of the world at the time,
Yeah,
crushing
that's
at the
something they've got to
Grammys.
they've
Yeah,
cornered the market on that.
totally. And it wasn't until like a couple of years later I got to see them in person with my dad down on the floor at Key Arena that I really felt like the magnitude of it, and it was just kind of one of those shows that blew me away. So I can only imagine what it would have been like to be there at the halftime show. But yeah, I mean, that one was a big one. I think just, not only one of the best bands in the world, but, just in a big moment, that I think emotionally a lot of people really appreciated.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason they're getting booked for that one.
Oh,
Like, people
totally.
know that people know that they can handle something like that.
Right. And, people didn't hate them yet for, forcing their music onto their devices and all the little things. And, all those things aside, like, Bono's truly just like a class act of a musician, and
Yeah,
uses his platform for so much good in the world. And it's kind of the curse of aging as an artist, I suppose. Eventually you put out stuff and people don't like it and kind of turn on you a little bit, but the guy
they're
deserves his
they're
flowers.
the band equivalent of like a friend that you introduce them to somebody and you're like, look, I know they're probably going to say something annoying. They're probably going to do something that's going to make you question them, but like just stick with them for a while
Yeah,
and like just watch, because they're actually good. They're good people. Okay.
you'll see it, you'll get it.
Yeah, you're gonna get a what was it, a Zoo TV tour where they're gonna try and call the president on the phone and pretend like they're talking to him, but you're also gonna get
Was that also when they had Dana Carvey doing the guest drum solo?
I don't even know about that.
We're gonna have to fact check that one.
All right.
Honorable mention, just because I think it was really one of the first like meme crazes I can recall, was the Katy Perry halftime show with the dancing sharks, where the one was just completely out of sync with the other. Like that one still to this day makes me laugh.
That went really big, and I think she flew into the stadium on like
Totally.
a giant like flaming tiger or something like that.
Oh,
I do
yeah.
remember that.
Well, and like total chips on the table here. Like if we were admitting like guilty pleasure pop music, that's one of them. Bad day, need to get people riled up at work, I will put on Katy Perry. Like I don't know what it is, but it brings a smile to my face, and can kind of get people to cheer up a little bit. So soft spot there. And then I think the last one I'd go with, that I'm counting as my number 3, was the year Bruno Mars and the Red Hot Chili Peppers performed. And admittedly, Bruno was the highlight of that. But for me, it's because that was the year the Seahawks won. So for years and years and years, I kept that recording on my DirecTV DVR, and every once in a while, skim through the game, watch parts of it.
Yeah,
so probably,
there's Bruno Mars.
Exactly. So other than like our agreed on number 1, it's probably one of the shows I've seen the most. Just and because of the sentimentality, partying with friends, watching our city win a legit title. It was such a cool moment in our lives, and I kind of always equate them with that. So
that one's gonna mean a little more to us.
Totally. So number 1 was what? Janet Jackson and Justin Timberlake.
It had slightly less FCC complaints.
Yes.
But it didn't have 0. We'll talk about. But yeah, we agreed ahead of time, and it wasn't a big argument, but we were gonna have to share number 1.
Yeah, I mean,
and
we both knew each other well enough to know that.
Yeah. And number 1 is, of course, the Prince halftime show.
Yeah.
The year on it is 2007. It's held in Miami. It was between the Colts and the Bears, which feels impossible now.
Right? A lot can change in 17 years, huh?
Yeah. But sounding much more possible is the Colts winning 29-17.
Mm-hmm.
It was the very first time that Pepsi had sponsored the halftime show. And the set list was an intro of We Will Rock You into Let's Go Crazy, and then a medley of Baby on a Star, 1999, a version of Creedence Clearwater Revival's Proud Mary, a cover of All Along the Watchtower, a cover of Foo Fighters' Best of You, and then he ended on Purple Rain.
Not only did he end on Purple Rain, he ended in the rain with Purple Rain.
Yeah.
I mean, like, it was, God, you can't write a better, halftime show than what he did. It was just monumental. And, I remember at the time, the roommate I was living with was a huge Prince fan, even bigger football fan. So, it was kind of one of those, like, all right, Phil, shut up. Get your snacks, get whatever you need. Like, Prince is coming on. And
yeah,
the
we're
stereo,
not talking.
The stereo was maxed out down the hallways,
Oh.
at our dorms and everything. And, he was just blasting it. George was, singing along with all the Prince stuff. And, by the time he was over, it's just like, oh, I guess there's more game to go. All right. I mean, that's how good it was. It's kind of like you saw the headliner in the middle of middle of the show.
Yeah, I remember kind of, I was already a big Prince fan at that time. My parents brought me up on Prince. One of the first like cassettes that I can remember kind of having to myself and playing a lot was his Diamonds and Pearls album.
Ooh.
So when I saw that, and I can relate this to one other thing, but when I saw that, I had kind of a feeling of, like, did I really just see the best Super Bowl halftime ever? Or like, is that just me? And the other time that I got that feeling was when you had gotten me a special preview ticket to Mad Max Fury Road.
Mm.
And that was something I was already excited for. I was a big fan of the other Mad Max movies, and that was one of the first showings. So we didn't have a big like bunch of opinions on it, but I went and saw it, and I came out of the theater, and I was like, was that the best fucking movie I've ever seen in my life, or is this just me being like a really big Mad Max fan? But those are two times where it panned out. That's two times where it was like, oh no, that wasn't me. That was correct.
Yeah, thought validated, by the most of the rest of the free thinking world.
Yeah, and I wrote down a note here that the Wikipedia on that halftime show says that numerous outlets have retrospectively ranked the performance as the best ever Super Bowl halftime show, and next to that statement there are no less than 9 of the little Wikipedia citations.
Mm.
So I think so you can take that one to the bank.
No, I mean, I think it's going to take a lot to top that one, and it's just the mix of like legendary artist, but still at the top of their game. At this point, if you get kind of a legacy act, it's kind of like, okay, yeah, like the Who did this halftime show one year. That was cool, right on. It's the Who. They're all 70, great, but it was just that perfect vibe with Prince, and yeah, good luck ever topping that one.
Yeah, one thing I'll always remember is it deploys like maybe the most memorable visual of all the Super Bowl halftime shows, where a giant cloth screen gets like air blasted into the air, and then they put like a spotlight or something behind Prince so that he's performing as like a 50-foot tall silhouette on this giant like cloth that's flying up, and it is so cool. But another side note on that specific moment, I read that there was in excess of 150 people complained to the FCC about the Super Bowl broadcast that year. And the majority of the complaints were about Prince, because during that moment, he kind of like turns and has his guitar like, and he's in silhouette. So, it's
right.
all, he turns and his guitar is kind of, coming out of his mid region. and he's playing a solo that's going up and down the neck. So,
Yeah, that's
you know,
that's weird though. That's probably like the first time Prince has ever had any sexuality in a stage show. So
well, that's what shocked everybody. They said,
yeah,
I you know, they expect that sort of thing from Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, but
right,
not the man who turned his name into a some sort of symbol.
right, exactly. I mean, this is the guy from Purple Rain here. A good,
Yeah.
decent guy.
And I did mention that it was the majority of complaints were about that particular portion of the halftime show. There were also a number of complaints about a Snickers commercial that year, which featured two men kissing.
Ah,
Yeah, so that's apparently something you can complain to the FCC about in 2007.
huh. I mean, yeah, all right. Good for you, I guess, if you take the time to file a complaint over such things. So, did you ever have the opportunity to see him live?
I didn't. I did not.
I did one time, and yeah, it's.
I guess that's hard to say. I'm sure I had the opportunity plenty of times, but
yeah,
but that's
never happened.
That's one of those where I know, like, if I go now, like, I've seen concert DVDs, and I've seen live shows and stuff like that, and it's going to be different, and it's going to be something else. But, like, what if I go and it's not as cool? I think it was a very low chance, but, like, between that and most of the time I have no money, which is the better excuse.
I mean, exactly. I will say I was lucky enough one year. My mom gave my wife and I tickets to go, and this is like after a death in the family, so kind of going through a downtime, and really just kind of being in that arena with him really kind of breathed a lot of life back into our souls at the time. And it was just, I mean, everything you could possibly imagine, the jamming, the little dirty chat that he does on the side, playing all the hits and just weaving in covers in and out, and just every instrument, the dude was amazing.
Yeah. And I mean, speaking of that, like, when he passed, I feel like the kind of go-to track, and I hope I'm getting this right. You'll probably be able to tell me, but I feel like the go-to track that a lot of people put on was, I think it's "Let's Go Crazy," which has the intro with the "Dearly Beloved."
Yep.
We're gathered here today to get through this thing called life.
Electric word, life.
Yeah, and I feel like, I don't know if there's ever been a moment where an artist has passed where they had something so perfect lined up that sounded like he was talking directly to you about his own passing, and he's saying, we're gonna get through it. Like, it's so, I mean, I guess it's kind of almost the same, forethought to put out a song called 1999 in the 80s and be like, you just fucking wait, like, I'm about to make $1 billion.
Right.
Nobody else has thought of that, but
I'm writing my funeral music 40 years in advance, guys. Just have it on CD by then. Yeah, no, I mean, that's a great one there. I don't know. We should do an episode just breaking down Purple Rain the movie sometime. Get a little more.
I mean, we're gonna run into it. He's on the list. He's on the list at least a few times. Okay, so going through the list, I'm searching. Number 91 is Purple Rain. Number 198 is Sign of the Times.
That's the one I was thinking of. Yeah.
393 is Dirty Mind. And that's it.
I know in the scope of things, it's a good ranking for Purple Rain.
That's way more.
That feels so low.
Yeah, very good. I mean, it's weird when you gotta, like, you think like 500 albums.
Right. To be in the top 20%, you're still doing pretty dang good.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I was thinking about the Weezer's Blue album yesterday, the last episode at 250. I'm like, are there really 250 albums you think are worse? Like, and that's a big time album, but like 200, there's 250 great albums,
right?
Exactly. Like, but it feels like that every single time you look at anything on this list. So.
We'll love it, man. Looking forward to tomorrow's show, though. Yeah, it's going to be good.
Yeah, it's an incredible strain on us, but we are putting an episode in the can every single night.
Right? Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So, what are you listening to this week, though?
This week, what I'm listening to, besides, of course, the album that we are running down this week, was the newly dropped Weekend album, "Hurry Up Tomorrow."
Super cool album.
Yeah, I don't know if other people knew that was coming up, but that was one of those that just kind of popped up and said, "Hey, so and so has a new album," and I was like, what the hell are you talking about? Like a new song? And then you look, you bring it up, and you're like,
there's a whole thing.
Holy shit!
Yeah.
There's a whole album. I was super jazzed because the first track was produced by French duo Justice, who I love. I forget if I've talked them on the podcast yet, but that's a really big group for me.
Did I see you repping the shirt?
Yep, I was going to say I don't think we're doing a video yet, but I'm wearing a tour shirt of theirs, even though I have not seen them on tour just yet. And Mr. Helio is wearing, I believe, a Spinal Tap recreation.
No,
shirt
it's not a recreation. This is an actual skeleton.
Oh, there you go.
And it is green.
Perfect. But I know you were listening to that one too. So what did you think?
Yeah, no, it's I've definitely loved the last couple albums he's put out, and I think we talked about the term a little bit that I was coming up with. I was thinking like it's this total Blade Runner pop, because he's got this great blend of like dark synth sounds, but still the pop style vocals. It's kind of like what I can imagine Decker listening to, as he's popping into like a restaurant or something like that, something in the background.
Yeah, it's really interesting that like, we've had a revival. We talked John Carpenter last week, but there's been a revival of the kind of 80s synth movie cinematic genre that came up. Kavinsky had a big moment with the movie Drive, and the song that he had on that. And there's all kinds of like really, really good artists that do that now. There's one called Perturbator. There's a bunch of artists that show up on a video game soundtrack called Hotline Miami that do it. But it's just super
King Gizzard
interesting
album
that, like,
too, that they put out, where it's just like, oh yeah, we can do this too.
Yeah, but it's super interesting that like that happened, and one of the places that it kind of like pushed its way into is albums like the last few from The Weeknd. Like, different people heard that and they said, oh, I want to do this too.
Right.
But this is so cool that like, it crossed over like that.
No, exactly. It's kind of a long way from, the old 808s of before and beatboxing for that kind of music. It's really evolved and evolved in a way of using old technology almost to get that cool sound. But the one thing I heard, and I'm interested to see if you heard this at all, and I really want to try it out, is that there's a version out there that's actually mixed for like Dolby Atmos, specifically like if you have Dolby Atmos headphones. And when I was listening to it in the car the other day, I could definitely tell that there's like some, I want to say like location-y stuff with the speakers and sounds and everything, where you could definitely tell there's more to the mix and kind of creating a soundscape as opposed to just like, here's your stereo track.
Really cool.
So I do want to check that out.
I know we have a couple of I know we have at least one set of headphones here that's like made for video gaming that I think has some sort of separation, but I'll have to look up if it does have some kind of Dolby Atmos thing, then yeah, I'm gonna like go and find all the albums that do that and be like, I need to borrow so-and-so's headphones here for a week.
Yeah.
Because that sounds awesome.
I don't know if Steven Wilson's done like any of the Pink Floyd or Yes stuff with it yet, but I know he definitely did all the 7.1s and things of that nature. But yeah, it's kind of just cool to see how artists like him keep, evolving things. And yeah, an album in Atmos, like, okay, wouldn't have guessed.
That's so cool. I guess this week, also the other things that came up was a album that Rick recommended that we listen to kind of get in the context for the NME album this episode. But one of them was Bob Dylan's Bringing It Back Home. And then you gave me one that kind of came in right under the wire that I really, really liked, which was Father John Misty's I Love You, Honey Bear.
Yeah, that one. I'd heard it a lot when I was working at this particular restaurant when it came out, and I kind of burned out on it. Um, so I forgot about it for 8, 9 years, and then for whatever reason was reading about it again in the last week or two, and was just like, yeah, I should give this one another try. And then in the
Mm-hmm.
context of like our Beach Boy talks and things of that nature, and just kind of this new way of looking at tunes recently, like I put it on, I was just floored by it. Just such fun music. The guy's a great witty writer, but the band behind him is great. Everything just sounds so cool and full, and it's not just a guy with a guitar, which nothing against that at all, but this is definitely like a full production here, and I love it.
Yeah, there's a lot of fun. There's a lot of fun studio
Hmm.
stuff going on, which is definitely a big. Well, because when I was listening to it, I mentioned some of the stuff that was like jumping out at me from it was like you said, the Beach Boys, and then also a lot of the stuff that gets labeled yacht
Yeah.
rock. Not so much like the Steely Dan end of it, but a lot of the Michael McDonald, like the real smooth stuff, and even his singing speaking style, like really sounded to me like Michael McDonald. And another thing that I heard a lot out of it was Todd
Mm,
Rundgren, and I'm like, man, I don't hear enough Todd Rundgren influence on new stuff. So like to hear it like so clearly one
yeah.
time, like I loved that.
uh yeah, Bored in the USA, that one. It's such a great track, and some of the lines in there always make me laugh too. I mean, no matter how many times I've heard it. And yeah, it's a gem. I think it's going to work my way back into its regular rotation again.
Yeah, that one's gonna get more spins for me.
And he did
I
he
had
did
it
put out a
on.
new one too, I think like a month ago.
Yeah. Oh, interesting. All right. Yeah, because I'm gonna try that one again. I want to listen to it on headphones. I had it on a speaker here in my little musical corner of the house that I stuff all the instruments and podcasting equipment in.
Exactly. Brady Studios.
Yeah, so I think it'll be a different experience on headphones, but it was still really good just
Yeah,
out and about and like sitting and enjoying right here.
good. Yeah, no, I'm glad you like that one. Definitely gonna be on the air a little bit. And I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
Well, let me think. It comes up later because it's something that came out after this list was made, and maybe we talk about things that might go on the list down the line.
Yeah, I control F did the list for Misty and nothing came up.
Yeah,
So yeah, if maybe someday if you wanna cash in a vacation episode and
yeah.
mention it might be we might have to do like a grab bag of a vacation episode because there's so many things that we're like I really want to talk about that on air, but there's like not going to be much of a context unless we shoehorn it in.
No kidding.
But nobody can stop you from shoehorning when you see an
I know.
opportunity.
When we're under
So
contract,
go if you feel like it, go
there you go.
ahead.
Exactly. When we're under contract, we'll play ball. But until then, we're calling the shots.
Yeah. So what have you been listening to besides the things that I mentioned that I think we're both listening to?
Yeah. So this week, kind of seeing that they're going out on tour again later in the year. Had some Nine Inch Nails going on. Downward Spiral, The Fragile. And even just kind of mixing in some of those Ghost albums for a little bit of ambient stuff. Driving around or having on at
Yeah.
work.
Yeah, that was one of the few big tour announcements I've seen
Hmm.
where I genuinely had to think like I might have to find money for this, like I might
Yeah,
sell blood or
tremendous,
something.
tremendous live show, and kind of one of those like where I'm waiting to see what the opening act is, but at the end of the day, it's Nine Inch Nails, man. They're going to be good. You know, um, Trent brings it. Even if he's not the angry young man he once was, he still knows how to be up on stage and perform. And yeah, it's not like they're going to be doing soundtracks. They're going to be bringing the hard stuff, the good stuff. But I
Hmm.
think part of also the excitement about Nine Inch Nails was hearing that little bit about Lady Gaga, doing an industrial album, and it kind of got me thinking, like, when's the last time was anything industrial, like, really popular?
Yeah. And sometimes you'll hear like an artist's name brought up and they say something like that and you're like, but is it really going to be, ambient? Is it really going to be thrash metal? But I feel like, Lady Gaga's music and like the the section of music that she's plugged into, if she's telling me that she's going to come with an industrial album, like I trust that she's going to show up with something that is gonna it's gonna sound industrial.
Is it going to be like, dirty, skeevy heroin rock like Ministry and Al Jorgensen? No, probably not. But it's going to be like Lady Gaga paying homage to industrial music, and that's probably going to be pretty badass. I mean, look what
Well,
Beyonce
now
did for
she's going to
country.
show you.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
now she's going to show up and show you, and it's going to be Lady Gaga FDM is a drug against war.
Totally.
And we're going to be like, well, shit.
Good way to dive in, girl. Exactly. Another one I was listening to this week a lot, another one of Mr. Quinn's recommendations was that Joni Mitchell album, Hijira. And definitely, some similarities between that and the Laura Marling album we talk about. Singing for sure is definitely, and some of the vocal influence. But for me, as I was telling you and Rick, it was something I hadn't listened to in years and years, and I had only really heard it before under like the lens of I love Jaco Pastorius, the bass player. Arguably one of the greatest jazz players, if not just bass in general. But the thing about it on this one is, while the guy's a virtuoso, it's not flashy show off. It's just very nice, melodic, perfectly accompanying Joni sets the mood perfectly with what's going on. So this time, looked at it more of like the singer, the lyrics, Joni Mitchell herself, and not just a study of Jaco on somebody else's album. And no, I think that's another one that's going to work itself into regular rotation for sure. And I am eager to see. I don't know if you ever use the DJX thing on Spotify. Sometimes.
Just to see what happens.
What I found recently is it goes back to a lot of the same stuff over and over again. But now that we've been, kind of working in so many different things, I'm eager to see if I can start getting a little wider range. And, maybe now that there's some Joni Mitchell in there's some folk stuff, there's some new things. So hopefully let technology open my ears a little bit more to some new things I wasn't listening to before. And, not DJX playing four songs of grunge or Frank Zappa at one time in a row over and over and over again. So
yeah. And not to, plug Spotify too much because they are evil, but they're the evil that I'm roped into a family plan on. So I'm sorry, I can't really do anything about it just yet. Like I'm working on it. But another good way to find stuff like that is if you search there's an auto-generated playlist for everybody that's called Release Radar. And like I've found, if you go into that, like the top like 1/4 or 1/2 is going to be artists that who are like, maybe they're featuring on another thing or, maybe they actually have something new. But then the bottom half of the list is going to be people that like you look at and you're like, I don't know what the F this is. And yeah, like now that we're kind of peppering our Spotify with different stuff, like there's going to be artists and like mixes in there that like, I just like popping around randomly down there and being like, do I like this or not? But yeah, it's going to be a bigger variety of things in there to check out. And I'm kind of excited.
Some days we just don't need, space themed death metal. Sometimes we want a little break from that. And, hopefully now Spotify can recognize that we are men of many diverse and eclectic interests and tastes.
Yeah, we're complicated people.
Exactly. Okay? Last one I'll touch on. I'm almost tempted not to say it because of the ass he's made of himself yet again the last couple of days.
Very recently.
Yeah. In no way do we support Mr. Yee and his views. But no, I was revisiting the Kanye West album Yeezus the other day, just kind of that like hybrid of industrial sounds, dark synth, as well as just, using it in kind of a different context and the hip hop and everything. And I'm just going to go with, hate the artist, not the art on this one. It's a brilliant album.
Yeah,
Obviously the
and
guy,
you kind of get
needs help. There's not much more to say
you,
about it.
but you kind of have the benefit of when that came out. I don't I don't think he was up to I don't think he was up to anything great. But he wasn't on what he has been on in the past like day or so, which is not fun.
Yeah.
You can Google it if you want. But yeah, I'm actually a really really big fan of that album. That album Yeezus. I feel like the production in it, um, it's there's kind of two things happening there. One thing is he definitely must have been listening to Death Grips at the time, which is a two-man band that is the drummer from Hella, Zach Hill. Um, oh my god, and I forget the MC. I think it's MC Ride, is his partner on that together, and they make very experimental, like industrial, like rap music. And I feel like he must have been listening to that. But the other thing that happened was, I'm pretty sure I read that
Yeah, MC Ride.
he
You got it.
okay, but I also read that he kind of came in like late on his homework with that album and kind of made a lot of it on the fly with the people he was working with, and like the energy of those two things, like like kind of the like, I'm doing this at the last second and I'm inspired by like this really crazy sounding stuff, and like
Yeah, I'm effing angry.
he has a lot of fun line. Yeah, he has a lot of like fun lines on that. He has a lot of non-fun lines, but it was at a time where we were unsure if he was kind of kidding or just making a statement, or if he was saying these things. And like I mentioned Marilyn Manson last week, at the time we were kind of hoping, maybe you're just saying these things, maybe you're not a bad person. And now we've come to find,
You're
maybe you're a bad person.
you're harboring some views that many people can't align with, and we wish
Yeah,
you well, and
but
that you get all the help you need.
yeah, but and that one I feel like is the very last of the kind of unimpeachable Kanye albums, and they're all really good. Like, what are you gonna do? You can't.
Yeah.
You can't deny it.
Yeah, he's not the first artist to get himself ostracized from the pop culture world and everything with weird behavior or saying some cancelable shit. So it goes.
So let's talk about the news, the music news of the week.
It's a busy week.
It was a busy week, and we have a method of dealing with that a little down the line. But let's talk about some of the big headlines that we're getting. The first one that I feel like is really big news is Ozzy and Black Sabbath announcing a final show called Back to the Beginning, which he's gathering up the original Sabbath lineup, and they're performing one last time in Birmingham in the UK,
where they started, where they're from. Yeah, essentially the birthplace of metal.
Yep. And once again, something not recognized by the Enemy Top 500 list. We're gonna take them. You'll notice we're gonna take them to task whenever we can on that one.
It's personal.
Yeah, it kind of is. Other artists that are listed as performing at the show are Metallica. Ozzy is going to do some solo stuff. Slayer, Pantera, Gojira, Alice in Chains, Lamb of God, Anthrax, and Mastodon are going to be there.
It's pretty good.
And then, yeah, that's not a bad lineup. Yeah. Some people who are listed as special guest appearances include Billy Corgan, Duff McKagan, Fred Durst, Jonathan Davis of Qorn, if you didn't know, Sammy Hagar, Slash, Tom Morello and Wolfgang Van Halen.
Yes. Now, weren't a couple of them forming a band together, like Tom Morello and Billy Corgan, because they're all like
Yeah,
Chicago
and
linked? Is that what I heard?
there was a drummer listed for that one too, who we don't have listed in the special guest appearances. So Google that one if you're interested. But yeah, some of them are listed as forming a supergroup, which we assume is gonna also play Sabbath songs. But yeah, I'm super interested in what that might entail for special guest appearances.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be a hell of a show. I can't imagine the price to get into that one. Yeah, one day only. It's not a tour.
I wonder if that's going to beat out the Oasis tickets.
Oh,
Do you think?
well, yeah, I think so. I mean,
You think it might?
yeah, it's definitely, unfortunately once in a lifetime at this point. I mean, not that Oasis playing together potentially isn't either, but knowing this is Ozzy's last show, pretty sick. Parkinson's really taking a toll on him. He's not even going to be able to stand for the show. He will be seated. So it might be kind of a bittersweet, event in the sense of seeing, such an electric performer and, music hero reduced to that. But at the same time, so few musicians and artists have the chance
Yeah.
to kind of go out on their own terms, so to speak, and really say farewell.
And his wife, his wife Sharon's claiming that he can still belt him out. So I mean,
there was a great around the 2000s SNL skit with Horatio Sands as Ozzy Osbourne. I don't know if you recall that one, but basically he comes in and like people are trying to talk to him and he's just completely garbled on like his lunch order. And then they put the microphone in front of him and like hit the track, and he sings just like as good as he ever did in the 70s and 80s. Obviously the dude's done plenty to his brain to warrant all the damage to it over the years, and we get it. But yeah, I hope he can just one last, riding high moment for him and kind of sail off into the sunset. And, I don't know if it was you and I that went to where, we saw Sabbath maybe on an Ozfest, and he had to walk off in the middle of the set because he wasn't able to hit some of the notes.
That might have been a different Ozfest. The Ozfest that me and you went to, I think they had bowed out ahead of time because of health reasons, and Iron Maiden headlined.
That's right.
The main stage.
Which, I mean, if you got to substitute somebody for Ozzy, that's a pretty good way to go.
Yeah, I had a final question related to this concert. So it's going to be a little bit of a walk, but stick with me here, and maybe wave at me if you feel like what I'm getting at. Okay.
Sure.
All right. So both of us were both fans of the now summarily deleted HBO TV show Westworld. All right. So for our listeners who might not know, that's a show where basically hyper realistic looking androids unknowingly live inside of like a all encompassing Wild West theme park where the human guests pay money to come in and mostly kill and have sex with them. And I guess spoiler alert for Westworld season 1. In the final episode, there's a character played by Anthony Hopkins who is the creator of the park. He's kind of like if it was Jurassic Park, he would be like the John Hammond character.
That makes sense. Good comparison.
Right? Yeah. So in the final episode, he's hosting a kind of a grand party for a bunch of human VIP guests of Westworld. And he gives a speech that's announcing kind of the start of a new storyline within the park. And he says it's going to be his last contribution to Westworld. And then he speaks a code phrase that prompts one of the android characters to kill him in front of his party guests. So I don't know if you see what I'm getting at here, and I don't mean to be
I'm
morbid.
I'm morbidly curious, though. Yeah.
Okay. So, I don't mean to be too morbid about it, but considering the man and considering the situation here, what Vegas odds would you give that one way or another Ozzy may intend to die on stage at this thing?
Wow.
I feel like it was something that I hated thinking about, but ever since I started thinking about it, I could not,
Yeah.
kind of put it out of mind.
No, I mean, the sad reality is that he'll probably die withered in a hospital bed or something equivalent, like, as most of us do. But if there was ever anybody that would do one last stunt like that just to cement his legacy as like an all-time person, like,
Do you think we could affect the odds if we could somehow get a note to him that says, "What if a giant bat bit your head off at this show?"
if you have a bat that can do it by July or whenever this show is, then yeah, man. I mean, like, I'm in. But yeah,
Call Iron Maiden again. Call Iron Maiden
Yeah.
again. That's their. They've got
we've
a
got
guy.
props. Yeah. No, I mean, I'm very curious to see how it will go, and I hope it goes off as planned. And I wouldn't be surprised if there's some tough moments like that, some tears, some, I don't want to leave the stage kind of stuff at the end. But man, I can't believe it. The dude, like, how the fact that the guy's still alive, is
Mm-hmm.
unreal and almost unbelievable at times. But he's not doing great, and that's going to be a show though.
It is. The next big headline we had this week was the Grammys went off. So a couple of notes I had under that one were a band we mentioned once this episode, and the performance that we mentioned last episode. Gojira won Best Metal Performance for the song they put on at the French Olympics.
Yeah. I mean, landmark moment for metal, definitely. So, I mean, and something that's kind of a popularity contest anyway, like the Grammys, it totally makes sense that, give them best metal performance. I mean, we can definitely debate till we're blue in the face about whether or not that was the best metal performance of the year. It was certainly the most visible, being blast worldwide and everything. But
well, yeah, I mean, if you ask me, probably the best metal performance that happened last year probably went down in a club that only fits 300 people. You know, it's like Wilco. It was like Wilco said, the best bands never get signed, and see, now I forget the rest of it, but they basically say, the best stuff is stuff that you're not going to see. It's happening somewhere else.
Totally.
It's but yeah, as far as the Grammys are concerned, like, I get it. And of course, wonderful researchers that we are, we didn't immediately pull up what all the other options they had were.
You rattle off a couple other things here, and I'll look that up.
Let's see. I'll try and guess. I bet you Metallica's in there. Gosh, what else for metal performance? I feel like
Judas Priest.
Was Mastodon up there?
Album?
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, their album Crown of Horns, Knocked Loose, featuring Poppy, the song Suffocate. Metallica.
Okay,
Suicide.
Yeah, that's another one that I guess I would have.
Yeah.
That's another one I would have expected in there was Poppy and Knocked Loose.
Yeah, and Spirit Box, Cellar Door. So, yeah, I mean, I
never heard
of Judas Priest was definitely on a lot of metal critics' list, like, as one of the better albums of the year, and still something I got to go back and listen to. We apologize for the interruption in this podcast. We had some technical difficulties and lost about 15 minutes of the type of conversation you'd expect from us. Meaning of life, guided meditations, and a ripping good recipe for lentil soup. Enjoy the rest of the show.
Helio, if you would hit the music, and we will kill some of these off.
Maestro, let's do it.
Billy Corgan has debuted a podcast about music this week. We can't have anything nice.
I mean, you invited him to your Super Bowl party. You don't want to hear him talk some more?
Yeah, this this may have been my fault, or it may have been our fault. I think. Oh, okay, that's the end of that topic. Topic number 2: The Weeknd has released a new album. It has a track with Justice and another by Giorgio Moroder, and we have actually talked about this one already.
But it was so good we thought we'd talk about it again, right?
Yeah, I mean, the album really is that good. It deserves. It gets another sting on the podcast. Oh, okay, next up. Post Malone has his own Oreo cookie now. Yep. You sent me a picture from an actual store, apparently, that had it. It is a chocolate top, golden base, and salted caramel and shortbread swirl frosting. How does that sound?
Try it. I don't know, though.
Whoop. All right, here we go. Blues Traveler is heading out on tour right now with Gin Blossoms and the Spin Doctors.
You gonna go?
I don't think
I mean,
so.
I'll go if I can skip 70% of the tracks and just hit next track.
I do want to hear Two Princes live someday.
Hey, if it's at the place where I work security, maybe I'll go.
Oh. A new study has shown that rats who are sober prefer silence, but rats who have been given cocaine prefer jazz music.
Yeah, I mean, the rats have figured it out before humans, at least.
I think we've pretty much scientifically explained Steely Dan. Chapel Rowan was on NPR's Tiny Desk concert, and for the record, that makes 3 episodes in a row for her that she has been mentioned on the Indy 500 podcast. So, let's keep it going.
I am excited to watch this with my daughter when she's feeling a little bit better. Down with the cold.
I saw a clip of it. It looked pretty cool. The Sex Pistols have announced a show that they will be performing Nevermind the Bollocks at Royal Albert Hall, featuring somebody named Frank Carter. Did you know who Frank Carter was?
Nope, and I probably won't after either, but, good for them for making money off of a so-so album.
I believe he's a Marvel Comics character who is the Punisher. Warped Tour is returning, and they will announce artists on January 27th. Which I am realizing has already passed. Apparently Fishbone will be there, and Pennywise will be there.
And a lot more to
there?
announce, but the disappointing thing is only 3 cities.
Oh! Wu-Tang Clan have reformed for a new full-length album that they are calling Black Samson, the Master Swordsman. I'm actually super excited about that. That sounds awesome.
If ODB rose from the grave for this, then Wu-Tang Clan's reformed. Otherwise, we better stick to financials.
I bet you they've probably got, archive tracks.
Good point.
Kanye West is back online posting about being a Nazi again.
I'd rather not see
that. Let's use the rest of this time to talk about Wu-Tang Clan. So like you said, I think I bet they have some archive tracks from ODB that they could probably use. Right
Yeah,
now.
I bet they do, but honestly, those guys are going to come up with something good.
The Black Keys have said in a Rolling Stone interview that they played a much maligned America Loves Cryptocurrency concert in Ohio because they were hard up for money. Quote, it was very simple. We lost all of our income for the year. We had retainers for people we were working with. We got offered a lot of money to play a show. We saw the Black Pumas had done the same event, and we were like, book it. It's that simple.
Hey, ask Matt Damon about crypto.
Primus have revealed that their new drummer is John Hoffman after an open audition that resulted in 6,200 submissions. He is a professional drummer who apparently plays more than 250 gigs a year and is known as the busiest drummer in Shreveport.
Dream come true. That's got to be so cool for him.
Patti Smith collapsed on stage in Sao Paulo, Brazil last week. However, in a health update, she says she's fine, cited migraine dizziness, and she's been cleared by doctors, and the whole thing looks much worse than it was. Quote, with all the strife in the world, this explainable incident does not merit so much attention. So you're welcome, Patty. That's the sort of talk that gets you put into the speed news rather than normal news.
I mean, just to discuss it now, we didn't almost kill her, did we, with our last episode?
The timing on that one was suspicious. We may have put something out into the psychosphere.
I mean, I knew when we started the show.
Hopefully she doesn't come back at us.
I said it to you, didn't I? We were going to kill Patti Smith.
I'll go back and listen, but I don't remember you saying that.
Oh, okay. I just imagined it. That's fine.
Maybe that we should have. Okay. Well, Helio, that was a really fun segment, but unfortunately, not all of our segments can be fun.
Mm.
You know, it's just kind of the nature of it's just kind of the nature of doing a podcast. Not everything can be laughs, right?
Well, or whatever this is, yeah.
Well, we always like to have fun out here, but right now we do have to get some business out of the way. So Helio, you and I, we both know our listeners. They're clearly intelligent people, and I don't think either me or you really needs to explain the economics of podcasting to them. So I know everybody out there knows that what we do isn't cheap. The show has real expenses. Studio time here at Abbey Road. We have a vast array of vintage microphones. There's various audio plugins, virtual instruments, synth patches, copies of Pro Tools. Rick Quinn, is paid a hefty retainer. We have music licensing, and keen-eyed listeners may have seen in the news that we were recently successfully sued by the Oasis's Gallagher brothers for the Knoll Way game that we did in our first episode.
We had to cut back on catering after that one got handed down to us. That's for sure.
That was unfortunate. So in order to mitigate these costs, we as a podcast had to make the hard decision to start accepting sponsors, and specifically live ad reads. We wanted you to know that we only do this to keep the lights on. We're not selling out. The Indy 500 podcast, we're always going to have our integrity, and we're only going to advertise, products and places that we both truly believe in.
Yeah, I mean, it goes through us. We're not just going to be handed down copy and told to read whatever. No, we don't take your trust. We don't take your trust lightly. You're here listening to to us talk about music, and we really appreciate it. And if there was another way around this, we would have taken it, but it is what it is. We hope you won't hold it against us, and we promise that it's going to result in a better show for you, our fans, who we love and appreciate. So without further ado, I think our sponsor had requested some music. Let's see. Yeah, should be here in our notes. They handed down something.
Okay. This episode is brought to you by our sponsor, Colonel Morrissey's Authentic Texas Barbecue Smokehouse. Howdy, folks. We here at the Indy 500 podcast are pleased as punch to tell you that there is a light that never goes out. And that light is the neon "We're Open" partner sign at Colonel Morrissey's Authentic Texas Barbecue Smokehouse.
Bless our hearts, it's a brand new casual family dining restaurant from the former Smith's frontman. Let it fall off the bone brisket will have you asking, how soon is cow? No need to say please, please, please to get what you want at Colonel Morrissey's Authentic Texas Barbecue Smokehouse. There's something for everyone on the Colonel's menu.
Darn tootin', Helio! Listeners, when you visit Colonel Morrissey's Authentic Texas Barbecue Smokehouse, you'll discover that some grills are bigger than others when you see the size of Colonel's 32-ounce "This Night Has Opened My Ribeye" steak with deep fried onion toppers.
And girlfriend won't be the only one in Tacoma if you've got enough true grit to finish the Colonel's Big Mouth Strikes Again Food Challenge plate. Never had no one ever managed to defeat it and get their photo put on the Wall of Fame. Could you be the first to tame it?
So come on down to Colonel Morrissey's Authentic Texas Barbecue Smokehouse, where the Colonel always says, "To dine by your side is such a heavenly way to dine."
And don't forget to use code Indy500 at checkout to get 50% off a double-decker russet baked potato with all the fixins. And now, back to the show.
Yep, big thanks to Colonel Morrissey. We appreciate it.
And now we're on to the multiverse of lists.
What do you know about the multiverse?
The multiverse. Fizz had his theories. He believed it was real and dangerous.
Well, he was right about both.
he was indeed right about both. So, in this segment, we take a look at into the multiverse of if me and Helio would have chosen a different topic or a different list to read off of what we might have been reviewing this week. So we, on the last episode in the random number generator, we received number 263. And in the multiverse, where we are reviewing the Rolling Stone top 500 greatest albums of all time, we would be looking at their number 263, The Beatles, A Hard Day's Night.
Ooh, that is a good one.
What do you think of that? Yeah. That would have been, I mean, dealing with the Beatles on our third episode after dealing with Patti Smith on our second episode,
Yeah, I mean, at least this is a pretty straightforward album. There's plenty of stories and things around it that'll be fun to touch on when we do get to this one. But yeah, I mean, I gotta say, maybe this one would have been too easy.
Yeah, and I feel like people might have accused us of cheating if we were hitting up the Beatles that early, and
which means we'll probably spin a Beatles album anyway at the end of this episode now.
Yeah, if it happens, well, if it happens, you can roll back to this moment in the podcast and know, we talked about it, so it couldn't be that we had planned it.
We were cooking something.
Yep. Let me read off the track list on that one, just in case people aren't aware. It goes: A Hard Day's Night, I Should Have Known Better, If I Fell, I'm Happy Just to Dance with You, And I Love Her, Tell Me Why, Can't Buy Me Love, and that's the end of side 1. Side 2, Anytime at All, I'll Cry Instead, Things We Said Today, When I Get Home, You Can't Do That, and I'll Be Back.
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody has their own favorites, but there's definitely a couple all-timers on there, but maybe not the most top to bottom, complete best Beatles album.
Yeah. And in another multiverse where this podcast is focused on movies, not that we haven't, focused on movies here and there already, but if we were doing the IMDb movies by user rating, number 263 is Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, the original with Gene Wilder.
Gene Wilder, excellent. Oh, I still get to watch that one a couple times a year with my kids, and I love it every time. It's just the perfect mix of like innocent childhood movie and psychedelic, like what the fuck is going on here?
Yeah, and it's a morality play for kids too. If you get out of line, you may be deformed or die.
Right. I mean, turn into a blueberry and have a date with Mr. Smuckers.
Yeah, exactly. Get sucked into a tube full of chocolate liquid.
Exactly. Well, that actually reminds me.
Lose control of your gravity and float up towards a spinning fan.
That happened to me once. It wasn't fun. Too much Jolt Cola, man.
That'll do it.
So that actually does remind me, though. We're going to talk about 2010, a little bit of the year that was, but interesting connection that was the year that the cut in.
Something's up.
Okay, yeah. So it's time to run down a little bit about 2010, the year this album did come out. So this came out March 22nd, 2010. The number one song at the time was Break Your Heart by Teo Cruz featuring Ludacris. Some other artists also in the top 30 Billboard USA at the time. You had Bad Romance by Lady Gaga. A couple of songs by Rihanna in there. Baby by this little teen heartthrob named Justin Bieber. And Taylor Swift in her pre-pop, but uber country phase, Today Was a Fairy Tale. Number one in the UK at the time was Telephone by Lady Gaga featuring Beyonce. So
that's a really good song.
Yeah, I mean, she's definitely...
that might be my favorite Lady Gaga
It's
song.
a really good... I mean, I'm still partial to Poker Face, but, it's pretty good, though.
and I'm sure I've sent it to you once, but if you want to hear something really cool, go to YouTube and look for the mashup of Enter Sandman and Lady Gaga's Telephone.
I'm gonna have to do that. Absolutely.
I think it's more of a remix, but it has it has everything you need for a mashup.
Okay, I'm down with that.
Yeah.
One thing looking at the charts that I thought was pretty wild, a little song called Don't Stop Believing by Journey was at number 28 in the UK charts. And that was because it was used on the show Glee, and it went over so well, it shot back up the charts, peaking in the top 10 more than 30 years after its initial release.
That's so funny. That's something that happened with Bohemian Rhapsody too,
Totally.
where I believe it was number one when it came out as a single, and then when Wayne's World came out, it shot back up again too.
Yeah, the power of TV and movies every once in a while. I thought that was pretty fun. Then switching over to movies, the number one movie of that week was the live action remake of Alice in Wonderland by Tim Burton, starring Johnny Depp, Helena Bonham Carter, Alan Rickman, and Crispin Glover. I do remember going to see this one in theaters, being super excited for it. My wife and I were dating at the time, so it was like, hey, let's go see Alice in Wonderland. Why not? How can that not be awesome? It wasn't amazing, but it wasn't bad either. It was fun.
Yeah, that's kind of very early on in the wave of live action remakes, isn't it?
Totally.
I don't recall many of them coming before.
Yeah, and it doesn't get lumped in with the Lion King type remakes and live action stuff, but no, it was fun. It's a cool movie, and good costume, good set design, and the same quirky story as before. So not a bad watch if you're looking for something.
I'm pretty sure I've seen that one too. Is that the one where at the end Johnny Depp's Mad Hatter character does like a wacky like breakdancing routine?
I believe so.
They like tease it for the whole movie, like, oh, he's gonna do the rigmarole dance or whatever it is, and then like finally at the end they're like, he's doing it.
Yep, exactly. That's the one.
All right.
Looking at the charts as well, number 8 was a movie called Avatar that just came out 3 months prior. I bring that up because it's just kind of interesting to think. Last week when we talked about 1978 and The Empire Strikes Back, or Star Wars: A New Hope being number 2, 10 months after its release, Avatar, one of the greatest grossing movies of all time, was only at number 8 3 months after coming out. So just kind of, again, testament to like the staying power of Star Wars, and how many more movies are getting put out into the theaters at this time as well. 3 days after this album came out was the first How to Train Your Dragon, pretty popular series that now they're pushing into live action. Exactly.
Remakes. Yeah.
In the social landscape, President Barack Obama passed a massive healthcare reform bill on March 21st, Affordable Care Act, or if you will, Obamacare.
When I was thinking of kind of like the macro view of 2010, and I was trying to figure out like, what's going on in America, the way I thought about it was, this is 2 years after Obama has been elected, and we're kind of settling into what that, if you're going to chop up eras by presidential, sections, we were really getting into like what that was gonna be.
Yeah, finally kind of out of the Bush regime and all that good stuff, and definitely doing something different in America, that was for sure.
Yeah, and getting the ACA passed is kind of the height of his power. Do the capital sunk into getting that done is kind of what I feel like reinvigorates Republicans and gives them something to galvanize around. So it's also a little bit of a turning point too.
Yeah. No, it's a very big moment, and I was kind of reflecting back on that one, and just tremendous time to see that happen, and just that whole evolution of Barack coming into his presidency and everything he got done, and now to where we're at, seeing a lot of it undone, but maybe.
And I was going to say, I don't know how much of that filters over to a like 20-year-old in Britain making folk music, but I don't think it has zero influence.
Absolutely. I mean, it was kind of just another color on the palette that is America. It took us that long to get, even a semblance of that kind of healthcare for everybody living here, while so many other countries around the world had it, but something we were still lacking.
Yeah. I'll spare this podcast my political ramblings until I can't help it, but I feel like I can help it.
You can blog it sometime, why not?
Yeah, well, you did just start us a Substack for kind of a written companion to the
That's
to the,
true.
podcast. So,
post some fun stuff on there every once in a while.
If I ever, we'll put the link in the episode description, and if I ever feel like, giving you my treatise on the on the Affordable Care Act, I'll put it there.
Done. Well, speaking of literature, the number one book in America at the time was called House Rules. It's a story of a boy with Asperger's who is accused of murder, written by Jodi Picoult. Spent 2 weeks at the top. Video games. God of War 3 was number one at the time. It was released just a week prior.
Is that PlayStation 2?
I think it's PlayStation 3. I think, but yeah, I could be wrong. Okay. Did you play that one, though?
I definitely played God of War 1. I don't know if I finished 2 and 3, but I probably played them. If it was on PlayStation 3, I'm going to say no, because my personal history with PlayStation 3 was that when George W. Bush gave us our his whatever $200-$300 rebate, mm-hmm. I immediately went out to go buy a PlayStation 3 and a copy of Metal Gear Solid 4 and just plowed through that, and then maybe took a look at 1 or 2 other PlayStation 3 games, and it was yeah, whatever, I finished Metal Gear 4, what do I need this for? Right. And I sold it to a college Republican that I knew at the time who drove around in an S2000, and I constantly have regrets over that, specifically because it was one of the PlayStation 3s that was backwards compatible with PlayStation 2 games, which I didn't realize at the time was going to be a big
limited
deal.
commodity.
So, yeah, so there's that.
That would be nice to have. I do remember that one. It was PlayStation 3, and I mean, yeah, fun game. And then
as soon as I started looking at the timeline there with Bush and what was going on, I was
totally.
That must have been
the most popular Google search term, because in 2010 we had Google, was Facebook. Just this little burgeoning social media empire that
So it's probably mostly people wanting to go to their Facebook page,
exactly,
or instead of typing it into the browser.
What is this Facebook? Even in 2010, I don't think I had a page quite yet, and my girlfriend did, and I was kind of oh geez, I guess I better sign up. What is this? Oh, it has games on it. Cool, right on. I'll do it.
Yeah. Okay, but I can't put a My Chemical Romance track on it to immediately play like I could with my MySpace.
Get Tom on the phone here. Come on. What is this? Well, cool. That wraps up 2010. Should we start talking about the album real quick here, or?
Yeah, let's do readings here, or what's
Preview.
I'm breaking up. Hi,
this is Joel Schumacher, calling for Rick. I love your work and am very inspired by you.
Thanks, Joel. My name is Rick Quinn, and this is Quinn's Qorner. That's Corner with a Q. I'm here to commandeer the pod and quickly share 5 artists and albums that hopefully are helpful in providing context for how best to understand the album featured in this week's episode of IFP, I Speak Because I Can, by Laura Marling. Although she came up during an era of folk revival in the early aughts, her style is very different from those bands. Less the band, and more pre-Electric Dylan. Less Americana, more English fairy tale. Album number 1 would be 1965's Bringing It All Back Home by Bob Dylan, which is number 73 on the Enemy list. Listen to It's All Right Ma, I'm Only Bleeding, and then album opener Devil's Spoke. It has the same looping guitar, down, 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 down kind of sound, and the same mercurial rhyming. Dylan's Darkness at the Break of Noon, Shadows Even the Silver Spoon becomes Marling's I Might Be a Part of This, Ripple on Water from a Lonesome Drip, and so on. Album 2 is Hijira by Joni Mitchell, which is not on the Enemy list. Neither is Court and Spark, mystifyingly, a huge oversight. Her 2 albums that are on the list are Blue, which is at 63, and The Hissing of Summer Lawns, which is at 243. Marling shares Joni's idiosyncratic poetics and vocal delivery. Listen to Coyote on Hijira for a comparison point. Hijira, by the way, features Jaco Pastorius on bass. Pretty cool. Album 3 is Hell Among the Yearlings by Gillian Welch. Her album Revival is number 386 on the Enemy list. Gillian Welch is kind of the American version of Marling, someone born in the modern era who seems to have an almost supernatural ability to write within the musical traditions of the past. Album opener Caleb Meyer is a banjo-led murder ballad that is sonically akin to Devil's Spoke. Her songs I'm Not Afraid to Die and My Morphine have the same stark, timeless beauty as Marling's Hope in the Air, which, in my opinion, has the best lyrics on the entire album. Why fear death? Be scared of living. Our hearts are small and ever thinning. There is no hope ever of winning. Oh, why fear death? Be scared of living. I can't give up that quick. My life is a candle and a wick. You can put it out, but you can't break it down. In the end, we are waiting to be lit. Numbers 4 and 5 speak to her English influences. Number 4 is Pink Moon by Nick Drake. His album Brighter Later is 140 on the Enemy list. Nick Drake has that pastoral, ethereal quality and almost Crowley-esque mystique that English folk seems to specialize in. All of his albums are good, but the title track Pink Moon has the same gentle guitar work as the title track I Speak Because I Can. And finally, number 5, Liege and Leaf by Fairport Convention, which is 110 on the Enemy list. Fairport's singer Sandy Denny has a similar register to Marling. The overall vibe is very English, drawing on the Celtic origins of European folk music. The song Ray Nardine is a good example of Denny's vocals. It's very Enya, parentheses, complimentary. Speaking of Enya, how is she not on this list? Do you know that she sold over 80 million albums? That James Cameron wanted her to do the music for Titanic, and she said no? And that, most importantly, she lives in a Dublin castle, alone, with her cats. Enya rules. Anyway, that's all for now. Back to you, Brady and Helio.
Tuesday, 10.
Well, thanks, Rick, for that contribution. I mean, you could have asked before you came barging in. Oh, Brady, looks like he might have muted your mic, too, in the process. Jeez, what a savage. Oh, still there. Yep, still going.
How
There
about
you
now?
go.
Am I back?
Yep.
Okay. Rick, stop muting me. All right. It's and yeah, thanks a lot for giving us control of our podcast back.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
you can talk about Enya on somebody else's podcast, though.
Yeah, if yeah, come on. You know, if he wants to come on, he can just come on. You don't got to hack into somebody's podcast.
No, it's
well.
I mean, we invited him,
but I will say, I will say, what the info that he dropped is good info. It was, as he is wont to do, it provides excellent context for what we're getting into, especially when we don't know what we're getting into, which kind of was the situation this week. So the first thing, as we get more focused on Laura Marling and this album, I found a review of her debut album in either a magazine or a blog called Drowned in Sound that's purported to have captured a About Me write-up that Marling did herself from the time of her first album. And they didn't mention where it was from, but it seems like it was either on like an early website or perhaps like a Facebook page or MySpace, like we were just talking about. But I'll read it here, and this is something that Laura wrote. And I'll also note that it has some like misspellings and stuff, perhaps on purpose, perhaps not. But here goes. It says, quote, "On a mission to bring the music industry back down to earth, young singer, songwriter, desperate to leave school and move to London. Looking for people to let me support them. Well into indie music though, not impressed by this new indie scene of constant rolling out of new bands and the whole scenester image, though I am one of them, but at least I know it. Where did the indie in individual go? Well, hold on. This where did the indie in individual go away? I love playing and listening to new people who send a shiver down my spine.
Hmm.
So when I saw that, it kind of, that kind of cuts to it, right? Like that was what she wrote as a kind of mission statement for herself.
Yeah, and I mean, this is,
So
from the pen of an 18-year-old. That's when her first album
probably
came
younger
out.
than that. Like it's like depending on when this was written, like it almost sounds like it's written before she's put anything
That
down,
could very
right?
well be
Like,
too. Yeah. So I mean, really,
yeah.
teenager with a
But yeah,
pretty good
that's
confidence about herself.
yeah. I mean, in the context of talking about where she's starting to, first lay down recordings, like that's the age she's at, is like 17, 18, which is crazy. Like some people just have all the skills, right? Like,
Yeah, I mean, it kind of reminded me of like Jewel and Fiona Apple and some of those where it's just like,
mhm.
well, you are talented beyond your years.
Yeah. So she is the youngest of three daughters. Her mother was a music teacher, and her father ran a recording studio that dealt in, you will be shocked to hear, folk music. Her father is also noted as a fifth baronet, which is a hereditary title gifted by the British monarchy, and it was originally given to someone in her bloodline from the 1800s named Sir Samuel Stevens Marling, who was a politician and a cloth manufacturing baron.
Wow.
Yeah, so,
Is that like aristocrat level, but maybe not like royalty?
Yeah, from what I was reading, it's kind of, it's like, you've made a name for yourself, and the crown wants to, give you a little something here.
Nice.
A little walking around title. So at 16, she and her sister started pursuing music careers by living on the outskirts of London, and they became part of a nascent scene of British music that the press was labeling new folk, and that's new spelled NU as in new metal.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's unfortunate.
They were, yeah, that's rough. That might have been a shot at them. I don't know. It from where we're sitting, it looks like a shot at them.
Yeah, you can tell where our
But
bias is on new metal.
yeah, but they were, they were basically a group of people who were making attempts at reviving like acoustic instrumentation and UK style folk music. And a number of the bands at the time there would share members across projects. And notably, this is where three founding members of Mumford and Sons would eventually meet and form up. So Laura's kind of first foray into recorded music is that she became a founding member of a indie folk band called Noah and the Whale. And she's credited as a backup vocalist on their debut album. But she actually left the band before that album was released due to a breakup with the band's lead singer, Charlie Fink. And I've seen in various spots here and there, people who would say that the album that we're reviewing this week, I Speak Because I Can, is, like inspired or kind of pulls elements from that breakup. But I couldn't find anything concrete or any quotes from her saying that. And also when I listen to the album, I don't really hear it either. So I don't know if you had that context as you were listening to it, but I kind of, I took that as something that other people were kind of putting on it rather than her.
Yeah, I think, what I gathered from, the articles I read and some of the interviews was that while maybe it's not overtly about him and the breakup, it was just definitely, that period in her life that was a major part of it. So there definitely are songs in there about, relationships, about the responsibility of womanhood and things of that nature where, this isn't a diss track album on her ex. This is just kind of like,
Yeah.
We went through this. This is the person I saw you as, and now this is the person I'm becoming, and, kind of evolving and growing up a little bit more.
Yeah. The the writing is more it's more of a it's zoomed out. It's not, if it is about that, it's not narrowing in on it.
Yeah, there's
She
definitely a
doesn't talk about it that way.
couple songs in the album, where it's almost like character narrative, where she's writing through other people,
Mm-hmm.
And telling
Yeah,
a
and
story.
she does mention that that's that's a way that she likes to do songs, is coming at it from a character perspective.
Yeah, and one of the things, once we get into the tracks, we'll break it down a little bit more. But I did enjoy that it was kind of like, let's use some historical characters, to tell these
Mm-hmm.
stories that maybe I can relate to on some way, some level. Maybe not in a total literal sense, but I think there's some feelings and some emotions that she can connect the dots with that, really made for an enjoyable album.
Yeah, and so continuing on, she released her debut album, which was called "Alas, I Cannot Swim" in 2008. It was highly acclaimed, and she got to on the back of that release, she got to perform on TV shows like the Late Late Show with Craig Ferguson, which was a show that I really liked when it was on, and she also was on later with Jules Holland, which is a show that I love going back and watching on YouTube. I forget if I don't think I mentioned it on the show yet, but that one, the format of it is really cool, where he will have on like 3 or 4 bands, and they're all in one big room, like facing the center of the room. And he kind of like walks around and says, and here's Pulp, and here, and they'll play a song, and then he'll, the camera will go back to him, and he'll say, oh, thanks. And then coming up now, here's so-and-so, and the camera will just pan from freaking, Radiohead over to
over to Pulp, to like, Laura Marling, to
Jamiroquai. Yeah, it's super cool. So if you I highly recommend going on YouTube and checking out Later with Jules Holland, and just seeing if any band names that jump out, and watching an episode of
it. It's
really
a fun rabbit hole. I do got to see the Laura Marling performance now that you mentioned it, though.
Yeah, I feel dumb I didn't look it up. It would have been fun to say, yeah, she was on with so and so,
right.
But we'll find out later, and you can find out later. I also wrote down that during this period, she once had to perform on the sidewalk of one of her own booked shows, because she was underage and wasn't allowed into the club.
Wow.
And apparently you can actually look that up on YouTube as well if you search out Laura Marling busking part 1.
Cool.
So check that out.
I mean, that's pretty unique thing to see.
Yeah. So about this album itself, the one titled "I Speak Because I Can," it was produced by a guy named Ethan Johns, who is the son of another legendary music producer named Glyn Johns. So Glyn produced albums for like the Rolling Stones, Clapton, Led Zeppelin, The Who. So
just some underground
exactly
bands.
Lightweight.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Ethan's production style has been described as very old school. He likes recording full bands live with few takes, and most of his mixing and EQ he likes to achieve through the recording itself by mic choices, mic placement, and like careful selection of what room they're recording in. Ethan has produced, among others, Ryan Adams, his albums Heartbreaker, Gold, and 29. He produced 4 of the Kings of Leon albums.
Wow.
He produced a 2013 Paul McCartney album called New.
Was that NU or
multiple? that one is NEW. I don't think Paul McCartney was looking for
he wasn't going for a new Beatles vibe.
No, he wasn't going for like the year 2000 cutting edge thing.
Okay, probably for the best.
Yeah. And don't quote me on it, but I believe he has also produced all of the following Laura Marling albums. If not all of them, then a lot of them.
I mean, yeah, definitely a good
And then
pair.
Yeah. Uh, and then finally, I wanted to note he produced a Counting Crows album called Hard Candy. And that one I wanted to pull out because that album includes a cover of a Joni Mitchell song called Big Yellow Taxi.
Hmm.
And that track was included on NME magazine's worst songs of the 2000s.
Wow.
Yeah. And not only that, it was also declared the #1 worst song of the 2000s by the Village Voice.
Huh. Okay. Might have to post
Yeah.
a link to that in the
So-
comments if we can find it.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you go to the Wikipedia page for the Counting Crows album Hard Candy, they actually have a portion of the Village Voice write-up for it, and it is scathing with a capital S the way they talk about that track.
2-word review.
It is rough.
Wow. Okay.
But credit to Counting Crows and Ethan Johns. The album is actually pretty well reviewed.
Just that song in particular was a
Just
turn in the punch
that
bowl.
song in particular, and in the context of these magazines looking back, like they had a problem with it.
Yeah. Worst song. Wow.
Yeah, he actually plays on he plays as an artist on other people's records and has solo artist albums of his own. In 2014, his album The Reckoning was actually produced by Ryan Adams, so they switched chairs basically.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And I feel like I'm talking about him too much, but this is another thing I really loved. One of the artists whose albums he played on as a session guy was Benmont Tench from Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. He's the piano player for them. That session also included Glenn, his father, as the producer, Ryan Adams, Gillian Welch, who was mentioned by our hacker extraordinaire, Richard Quinn, and also Ringo Starr.
Wow, that's a hell of a lineup. Where does one find this?
Yeah.
Or what is this?
That is an album that is Ethan John solo album called no, this is Benmont Tench's solo album, and I'm sorry I didn't grab the title.
Okay, yeah, no worries though. That's something to look up for later.
Yeah,
that's a good hell of a group.
Yeah, I will definitely check that out. So Laura herself reportedly had to kind of hound and convince Ethan Johns to produce her record because he initially told her that he felt like he never did a good job with female artists. But she hit him with the old classic, "I'm not like other girls," which apparently worked.
I mean, hey.
And was apparently correct because they continued working together.
A great sales pitch,
Yeah. And I wrote down a quote from and actually it was from a 2024 interview from a blog called Last Donut of the Night. But this is Laura talking about Ethan Johns. She said, "When I was young, I was put in with Ethan Johns and I loved Ethan. I wanted to be in the room with Ethan, but I wouldn't have known how to get to Ethan. And it was other people who put me with him. Ethan was a great mentor because he's very old school. He'll only do 3 takes, only play with the band in the room, and he will never have your guitar taken away from you while you're singing."
I like it. I like his style.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I do too. The more I read up on him, the more I thought it was very cool, and I'm definitely going to try and track down some of the albums he's produced and some of his albums.
Yeah, it sounds like we're going to be hearing a little bit from him.
He's going to pop up again, I'm sure. So some quotes from Laura on the album I Speak Because I Can. I took these from a blog interview with her called For Folk's Sake. Excellent blog title. So here's a quote. They're asking her, how much of herself does she want to put across in her lyrics? And she says, "Not an awful lot, as much as you try, you can't write about anything else but yourself because that's all you know. But I wouldn't want to wear my heart on my sleeve because that's not what I'm like in my personal life. I wouldn't want to do that just for the sake of songwriting." With all my songwriting, it's all conscious, unconscious. The stuff I've been thinking about comes out in the songs. I don't really feel like I have much control over what comes out of my mouth sometimes. And I think this album is a bit more unconsciously guarded, but at the same time, not so intentionally guarded. They said Laura said that she felt more ownership of this album than of her debut. And quote, she says, "I think I'm more confident in the decisions that I make, which is a really nice feeling. Those gut decisions happen a lot when you're making an album, I think, and I had the confidence to follow my gut." And then talking about more of the themes, she says, it's something I've been thinking about, what it means to be a woman and a woman's place in the world, and in a more general sense, what it means to be an adult, which, makes a lot of sense when your debut album is at 18 and your next one is at 20.
Yeah, you're going through a little bit of a life transition there.
Yeah. And, to her credit, it's not the cliche of what she would have, of what you would, you would forgive somebody at that age for writing. But it's not, it's about that, but it's not about it in the way that, you would have expected, I think.
No, very old soul lyricism on this one, not necessarily 2010's 20-year-old.
Yeah. The Enemy magazine review of the album by a writer named Emily McKay is actually hilariously and on purpose hilariously fixated on the fact that Laura got a haircut at the time, going from a quote pixie blonde crop to a quote scraped back mousy bun. And she talks about like other famous celebrity haircuts and like what it portends usually for a person. There was also a NME live review of a 2010 show in Los Angeles where they said, quote, "She introduces a song so new that she wasn't going to sing it tonight. And she says, except I'm in LA and it's perfect for a film, a very specific film. Maybe a film that I'm too embarrassed to say. Don't judge me." And so she starts singing about bones and homes and darkness growing darker. And somebody shouts out, "Twilight." And it says, "You fully expect her to dismiss them, but what's this?" She's blushing. It is Twilight.
Nice.
So, no matter how much of an old soul, gal you may be in 2010, you cannot escape Mr. Robert Pattinson.
No, exactly. If you can. I mean, Team Jacob all the way, though, but, still.
Okay. I don't know if I agree with that. We'll do an episode on it. She did win the Brit Award for British Female Solo Artist in 2011 on the back of this album. Lady Gaga had won 1 year prior to that in 2010, so that's the company she's keeping at that time.
Yeah, pretty good. I mean, we heard how much control Lady Gaga had at the charts that year.
Yeah, and then finally on the cover art of the album, from one of her own Facebook posts, she wrote, the artwork was painted by Sophie Milner and was based on a photograph of me taken at home. So if you do check out the cover art, like, if you're holding it it's hard to do anything else when you're on your phone, but if you're holding it, far enough away and it's kind of small, it almost does look like a photograph. But then when you get closer to it, you look at it and you realize, oh, this is painted. It's actually pretty cool.
I didn't know that. Okay. I was wondering about that because it didn't quite look like a photo. Interesting.
It has kind of a vibe, like, but yeah, it's interesting that because for a long time when we first spun this, like, I looked at it and I was like, that's a weird photo.
Mm-hmm.
And then
exactly
you zoom in.
What do they filter that with on Instagram?
Mm-hmm. Some other quotes from Laura, from an NY Times Style magazine interview. They asked, "What records did you listen to when you were a kid?" And she said, "The records that were on in the car, we always had a Stevie Wonder record. We always had a Joni Mitchell record. And those were my childhood soundtracks. I'll always be a closet Steely Dan fan. Mm-hmm. But the first album I bought was by Macy Gray." And the interviewer says, I don't hear much Macy Gray in your music. And she says, no, that one got left behind. Which I kind of thought was interesting, because one of the things that's going on in 2010, kind of female, especially female acoustic music, is there's a lot of people who are taking on kind of a, I wonder if I can get you to think about this, but it's definitely inspired by Macy Gray, but it's like a jazzy, demure sound style of singing. If you're kind of hearing what I'm thinking of.
Yeah.
I don't want to call anyone out by name, but like there was a lot of it going on. I know what I can say to make you think of it. I don't know about everybody else, but do you remember the episode of Atlanta where there's a girl who covers Paperboy?
Oh yeah.
Like does an acoustic guitar. Yeah, it's that. And I think, there may be something intentional here where she says, the first album I bought was Macy Gray, and they say, really? I don't hear that. And she's like, yeah,
I'm not gonna try and pull that one off. Yeah.
But yeah, I kind of did appreciate when I first pulled this up and I saw what it was. I was kind of afraid that it was going to be one of those, but she doesn't do it. So thank you, Laura.
Best to leave that one where it is. Yep.
Yeah. Some other quotes here. They also asked, how old were you when you wrote the songs on I Speak Because I Can? And she said, from 18 to 19. That year in anybody's life is very much a transition. And I began to feel like an adult for the first time. I think the responsibility of that and of being a woman, those suddenly hit me like a ton of bricks. And my priorities changed a little bit. What I cared about and what I didn't care about. And they asked, what things were you caring about and not caring about? And she says, it has to do with what I do. I was so concerned about how I was being presented or projected and how people would perceive my music because of that. In order to have that much control over yourself, you have to be a very difficult person to be around. And also, I was very shy when I first started touring, and I feel like I know my place in the world now.
Man, I wish I had that kind of self-confidence at 20. That's admirable.
Yeah. I think back and I barely feel conscious at 18 to 20.
No kidding. Yeah.
and not just in a, I'm on my own. I can go buy illicit substances now. Like I mean that in a philosophical.
Yeah. Exactly.
What is consciousness? I think because I am kind of
who am I in the world, exactly.
Yeah, I am. Basically like a backpack's worth of stuff that I took from home to go to a trade college that has its own dorm, and besides that, like who knows?
Exactly.
So we can get into the tracks now. We can go one by one.
Yeah, absolutely.
What we thought there.
So track one, Devil Spoke. Definitely something that Rick mentioned on his segment. Really, I thought a great opener and a great just kind of hook to get that album started. A little bit of that kind of like upbeat, thundering rhythm going on. Really engaging. Guitar, banjos, and her vocals don't necessarily go over the top in it, but just well balanced in it.
Yeah, I threw the album on like immediately after we shut down the last episode, and the thing I wrote down during that listing session was like, oh shit, it's on. Like it's really it's a really cool like opening statement for an album. I think I might have been happier personally if the rest of the album was like all this, but I'm not unhappy that it has a different gear,
Yeah, I think, as a whole, using the dynamics throughout the album and going to different different tempos and just kind of different, overall volumes and intensities, really is what helps kind of sell the album as a whole big picture here. But yeah, I think it's a great way to, it reminds me of like Immigrant Song on Led Zeppelin, almost on Led Zeppelin 3, where it's like there's definitely
That's a, yeah.
slower moments later, but while you're here, we're going to get you hooked in, and this is my show, you're going to enjoy it.
That's really interesting, because there's another track later that I thought sounded, I thought I was crazy writing it down, but I thought sounded like a Zeppelin song. So we'll get to it. But really interesting that we that we both had and like right when you said that, I said I thought about it, and I was like, I do hear that. Like, that's really cool.
Totally. The next one on there, Made by Maid.
Yes.
The little English clever, play on words there. MADE by MAID. Basically, the responsibilities of womanhood that she spoke about. Just guitar and vocals recorded live. You can hear the little nitty gritties of her fingers moving through the guitar chords. Just, a nice authentic track from Laura.
Yeah, I like it. I like that the top two tracks lay out kind of the two extremes of where you're gonna go on the album. Track one is got a kind of a cinematic, like dark, layered style, and then this track is basically just Laura and an acoustic guitar. There might be some sparse moments of piano or somebody else's guitar that kind of float in and out. But it's very singer-songwriter.
Yeah, here's the spotlight on the person, and maybe there's a little bit of color in the background, but not much.
Yeah, this is where the Dylan comes through. I think in reviews of these kind of albums, it's where people start saying things like that it's haunting. And so, talking about the lyrics, she said she mentions that she's a person who she, quote, walks into the fog and finds a babe atop a log all alone. And then, the parts of the song she's talking about raising him, and says that he blames her for every wrong he ever made, but she can still see a babe under all that blame. But I'm forgot the day that I am laid. And I can always it's easy for me to tell when an album or a writer is like on their game and like doing something good, because I personally am not a lyrics person.
Same.
I would say half or even more than half the time I'm listening to songs, unless a person is recorded clearly and enunciating clearly, like I may not even be able to tell what they're saying until I listen to it a few times, or if I have a lyric sheet in front of me.
For the record, are you a subtitles on kind of guy when you're watching TV and movies at home?
Oh, yeah. We if it's not something that's like a comedy or like Jeopardy where it's gonna spoil something for me, we have the subtitles on all the time. It might be a millennial thing, or and it might be just the way they mix TV, but yeah. But like I was saying, I can always tell when somebody's really hitting it out of the park lyrically when the lyrics like stay with me and actually get to me, especially on like first listens. And like this was one of those that did that, where the lyrics are, and again, impressively, this is long before she has any kids, but she's writing something of a truth that that I feel about having a child, where she mentions that they're gonna blame you, and you may be forgotten sometime, but under all that, like, you're always gonna see like a little baby, which to a lot of people is gonna sound well, I don't know, cliche or
a little hallmarky, maybe
that you've heard a lot, but it's that way because it's true.
No, absolutely.
And also like, like an aspect of them being angry or blaming you for things. Like I feel like a very healthy part of parenting is cultivating an attitude where you're okay with that. Like you can't meet them on the battlefield of being angry at each other all the time. Like sometimes
Yeah,
sometimes you just gotta look at them with love anyway, no matter what they're feeling about you.
100%. And, I think my wife and I have made the joke before that, like, no matter what we do, no matter what our intent is, like, they're going to wind up in therapy. So, we might as well do our best and have our heart in the right place and accept that.
Everybody is now.
Exactly. We're still going to.
Sponsored by BetterHelp.com.
Exactly. We're still going to send them there. They're still going to have stuff to say one way or the other. So might as well do our best.
They're all going to have, they're all going to have stuff to say.
Exactly.
So, at least give them the memory of you smiling back.
Exactly. Yeah. And just kind of roll with the punches. And, if they tell you that you're the worst one day, yeah, that's what you signed up for. It's not all, it's all
It's
Hallmark
gonna
movies.
happen.
Yep. Exactly.
Yeah. The name of the game is not, the name of the game is not getting them to come out of it talking about, how great you were. It's getting them out of it.
Exactly. Raising a human.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, now track 3, Rambling Man. That's where I start to hear almost like a Simon and Garfunkel influence start coming in. Like there's like a cyclical sound of like finger picking guitar and singing over it that like reminded me of that.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. And I think this one, kind of to your point about it takes something a little extra sometimes to catch me lyrically. And, one of the lines I outlined here just resonates a lot for me is it's hard to accept yourself as someone you don't desire, as someone you don't want to be. Yeah, just kind of that, again, talking about finding your place in the world and being comfortable in your own skin, so to speak. It's kind of an adventure that you go through all of life, sometimes longer than others on finding that spot in the world. So that line definitely hit me pretty hard.
Yeah. And I actually wrote down precious little about this song, but I can like, I can still like hear it in my head when I see the title, and I can hear that. Gosh, I don't know that I wrote down anything about what was track 4 called?
Track 4 was Blackberry Stone.
Man, I don't think that one just must not have hit me, because I was going through multiple listens and kind of writing down my notes about each song. Like,
yeah,
I'm sure if we took a pause and like listened to it, I'd be able to come back and have like a bunch of stuff about it. But like, that one just must not have implanted in my brain.
Yeah, no, I mean, again, like there's not a bad song on the album.
No,
and I think
I agree.
Yeah, the ones that kind of those first 3 stuck out for me, and then the next track, Alpha Shallows, and then
I have notes about that.
Okay, yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts. But then, I mean, for me, the one that jumped out was the one after that again, Goodbye England, Covered in Snow. But let's hear your thoughts on Alpha Shallows.
Yeah. So on Alpha Shallows, I wrote down that it has a main riff, which is interesting because it's not, an album that it's not an album that I would associate with riffing, but there's a riff that really hits hard as the chorus comes in. That as I listen to it over and over again, I'm like, if you throw this on somebody else's guitar rig with some distortion and played it like a little bit harder and a little bit faster, like you could slot that into a metal album. You could slot that into like a Mastodon song, and I wouldn't question it.
No, totally.
Like it's a good riff.
No, I definitely agree with that. There was a song that I definitely thought like, okay, yeah, we're not doing the calm singer-songwriter thing right here. We're doing a little more heavy lifting.
Mm-hmm. And it is cool to visit all the different moods. And that's another track that I thought sounded kind of cinematic. It might be a silly way to describe it, but there's a number of tracks on this album where it sounds like, and maybe they did, but I'm like, these would be like such awesome like needle drop songs for like certain TV shows. Like it sounds like the kind of stuff that people who were making like TV shows and movies back then would have gotten a hold of and been like, we're gonna put this in a moment.
Yeah, very very cinematic.
Yeah. One thing I thought one time when listening through was that in the game or in the games Red Dead Redemption, there's like for as long as those games are, there's like 2 to 3 spots that they choose to drop in actual singer-songwritery songs, and I'm like, there's plenty of them on this album where like there's a famous part, I think, in the first game where it transitions from one area to the next, and the gameplay forces you to be on a horse riding into this new area and like seeing what's coming up, and then they play a song at the same time as it's happening, and that's the sort of thing that I could see these being used for. Another game that does that really well is Hideo Kojima's Death Stranding. He's a guy who's into all kinds of media, and he loves a good like needle drop song in that game. And like I would not have been shocked. I would not have been shocked if one of Laura's was like one of those.
I mean, we're probably going to see him post on his social media that he's best friends with her this week anyway, just because that's Hideo Kojima.
He's got the deal with the devil where like anytime he like thinks somebody is cool or something,
yeah, they're
like
at
that,
my house.
You'll see them like hugging him on his Twitter the next day or something like that. So congrats,
what a power
to
to have.
Yeah. So going on to track 6, called Goodbye England, Covered in Snow. So you said that was a standout track, and I also wrote down standout track, especially lyrically.
Yeah, no, it's kind of got like double meanings to it, which is kind of fun to look at the lyrics a little bit. Talks a little bit about,
and that's something she does a couple times.
Yeah,
I mean, there's a track called "Made by Maid."
Yes,
which
that's exactly
doesn't work so great on a podcast, but go look at the track list. And you get it.
So yeah, it talks a little bit about like her childhood love of home, and just kind of the wintry charms of the countryside. But it also talks a little bit about kind of the wife suffering in silence while her husband's gone. The line in there, "I cooked the meals and he got the life," kind of that being with the rock star, being with the famous musician, like you get to go out on the road, I'm just back at home. It tells a couple of interesting stories on there.
Yep, and then in the reviews and write-ups, like I constantly saw people pulling out the line to quote that she says, I wrote an epic letter to you, 22 pages front and back, but it's too good to be used.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, that's a great line. But then also one that I didn't see pulled often that I loved was where she says, I wrote my name in your book, only God knows where, and I bet you he cracked a smile. That's cool.
Yeah,
she's got lines.
She does. She's snappy. I like it.
And that's another song where near the end of it, she's singing convincingly about a child again,
mm-hmm.
which is super impressive for somebody who doesn't have one to have takes and to have lines that parents will hear and like resonate.
But maybe she had one in the form of her love interests at the time, writing these, and
that's okay. So yeah, maybe that's the perspective I should have taken to find that.
No, but I think that's the interesting thing about it is we can take those words and kind of apply it to our own situations and still find as much value as maybe what her literal intention
mm-hmm.
was. If she's the more mature person in the relationship, she feels like she's raising this babe, so to speak, and kind of also he's out there doing his thing while she's back at home. Yeah, there's definitely some inferences you can get.
That's making sense.
You can kind of get that from the idea of yeah, this is how this relationship came across to me.
Yep. I wrote a little side note for another quintessential England in the Snow song, C, Fox in the Snow by Belle and Sebastian.
Oh, we got a whole
And
snowy day playlist brewing here.
yeah, and I can pretty much guarantee that if you enjoy Laura Marling, you're not going to be disappointed with any of the early Belle and Sebastian stuff, where like Fox in the Snow comes from. So check it out. Going on to track 7 is called Hope in the Air. And that's another one that seems pretty generally acclaimed from the album.
Yeah.
I wrote down that musically it sounds almost kind of apocalyptic. And it does sound like everybody involved had correctly pegged this one as one to really work on and really get right.
Mm-hmm.
Because it is a really good song, and it also sounds like everybody was like bearing down and bringing their A game, creating it.
Yeah, and from the looks of it, this is definitely where she called in those friends, from Noah and the Whale, and she brought in the Mumford and Sons guys to really contribute on this. And yeah, that apocalyptic word, that's really interesting. The song, from my interpretation of it and what I've read, is that it's a kind of turning a hopeful leaf over in facing crippling like anxiety. As somebody personally, who's dealt with anxiety and depression most of my life, sometimes you do have those days of, what's the lyric here? Why fear death, be scared of living? Our hearts are small and ever thinning. She's totally, afraid of death, but, why would I do that? Today I'm going to say that, yeah, there's a little bit of hope in the air.
Yeah. And I pulled out that lyric too. And I wrote down that that's like the sort of lyrical darkness that I expect to find somewhere like a doom or a dirge metal band. Like,
Totally.
She can dig down to those depths too.
She might have a typo negative CD hiding somewhere around there. Yeah.
Yeah, but she does, about halfway through, she starts talking about like there's lines about being a candle that you can put out, but the wick is still around waiting to be lit. And she starts singing about, the hope in the air isn't being talked about as something that's gone anymore, but it's something that's back, even though she says that, not for me, but she says that it's back for other people.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's the tough thing about, anxieties and depression about that is, it can here today, gone tomorrow. Everybody else is fine, but not me now.
Mm-hmm. Track 8, What He Wrote. That was another one that jumped out at me for lyrics, and also because I believe that is one of and I'm going to feel bad if I'm wrong, but I believe it's one of the 2 tracks on the album that is based on the Odyssey.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. So I think that, and I believe she said the closing track is also one of them. Yeah. Okay. In my notes here, it says that final track is informed by author Margaret Atwood's novella, I'm not going to say that right, Penelopiad, a counterpoint to Homer's epic. And yeah, like when I heard that even existed, that was one of those times where I wished, like, during the week that we had more time, mm-hmm. or that we could, like, take a time-stopping time machine, because, like, I hear about something like that and I'm like, oh, I'd like to sit down and read that, but, like,
yeah, I know, it's a fun concept.
We have day jobs, we have children, we have one album a week to to try and digest. Like, we
got deadlines, people.
Yeah, we're bringing it to you.
Yeah, no, I did love this one. it's kind of one of those dual layer, but also writing through characters things we've mentioned. Um, she's reading letters that soldiers wrote their wives, during wartime, and also through the lens of Hera, reading these things from her man out to battle as well. So it's just kind of
Mhm.
a great storytelling, great perspective writing on it.
Yeah, and we here over at our house, just coincidentally, like 1 or 2 weeks ago, we rewatched the Armand Asante like
Oh,
TV movie version of the Odyssey,
yeah.
which is awesome. I love that. I think we watched it in school before, but
Where
yeah,
I,
uh,
I might have to sidebar and find out where you found that, just because I want to see that again.
I want to say that it's on Prime Video,
Okay,
but I know it's streaming somewhere,
awesome.
so you can find it.
Yeah, no, that was so good.
And while we're on the topic, and I had mentioned before being able to shoehorn things in just because we can. Um, there's kind of a connection here, but there's another work of art that I feel kind of pulls this move of taking taking something we know and like or taking like a famous story and putting it to a different perspective, and that I wanted to put a spotlight on and lend a hand to. And what I'm talking about is actually Darren Aronofsky's film Mother.
Mm.
Have you seen that?
Oh yeah.
Okay, so that movie is often kind of maligned as being, you know, just artsy fartsy and impenetrable, but there is actually um, like a key to kind of understanding it that I think would make it much more enjoyable if most people knew about it. And it's not like, people will say that often, but it's usually just like a fan theory or
Yeah,
something, or they're like, this is what it meant to me. But
you just don't get
this is
it.
not
Yeah.
what that is. It's not like bullshit IMDb trivia notes. Okay, this is like something. This is something that came from the director himself, because when that movie first came out, um, and there were screenings of it, it would often be accompanied by a printout that Aronofsky had made that explained that the movie is an allegorical retelling of the book of Genesis from the Bible, um, and possibly other portions of the Bible, but with a added character and an added perspective of Mother Earth, basically played by Jennifer Lawrence. So you go back and you think about it, and you're like, okay, obviously Javier Bardem then is God. Um, Ed Harris and I'm blanking on her name, but they're Adam and Eve.
Mm.
The two brothers, played by actual brothers, come in. Are um, their first children from the Bible. I'm blanking. Oh, Cain. Their children are Cain and Abel. One of them kills the other during the movie. At some point, um, Jennifer Lawrence breaks the plumbing in the house to get rid of a bunch of people, which is like the flood,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, so I kind of want to urge people to go and rewatch that with that in mind, because it may well go from a movie that you saw and was like, "What the hell is this?
Right.
This is insane," to watching it and having it, become something else. And when I understood that and I watched it, it was kind of it hit me as it's actually one of my favorite movies from the past couple decades, basically.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting point. I mean, context can kind of be everything, right? Yeah, if you
Yeah.
just crumble up that note when you get it and just walk in, yeah,
Mhm.
unless you're really, really sharp, you're probably going to be pretty lost on that one. But no, I think it does tie into like what an interesting device that can be to write from a different perspective and just kind of reframe these stories a little bit. And I think
Yeah.
another modern huge example of that is Wicked, where it's like, yeah, we know the Wizard of Oz, we
Yeah.
know that story. Oh, this is the evil witch. Well, she's evil from one side of the lens, but let's look at the whole different way of how she got there and why she's called that. because you're only getting one side of the
From my-
story. So
Yeah, from my perspective, the Jedi are evil.
exactly, there you go. Couldn't have said it better myself.
There you go. Track 9, Darkness Descends. This was another one where I wrote down that Laura is visiting Simon and Garfunkel land.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I mean this is complimentary, in case it's not coming across that way. Like I mean that positively. And I think, you know, I feel like I'm having trouble describing kind of exactly why I'm enjoying these tracks so much without sounding like I may be bagging on them, you know. But I think it has a lot to do with how she's kind of moving beyond what would be the obvious moves and decisions of like folk acoustic music of especially this time frame, you know.
Yeah, and you know, I think it's, to your defense, like it's okay to wear your inspiration and your roots on your sleeves in crafting music. You know, it all has to come from somewhere, but you know what separates it is that, you know, lyrically and the story she's telling, she does make it her own. You know, and there's you know, intelligence to it. It's not just a Simon and Garfunkel cover. It's, you know, something informed by that type of music.
Mm-hmm. And I think this is also one of the tracks where I loud and clear hear the Bob Dylan influence coming through.
Mm-hmm.
There's parts in the album where she does a vocal thing he has where his singing or his lyrics, especially when they're more spoken word, like get out in front of the music, and it almost sounds like he's sprinting ahead of them.
Yeah.
And like, you know, it's like a burst of exuberance that kind of pushes him past where the beat is in the song. And she does that too, like every once in a while on here.
The next track on the album, the title track, I Speak Because I Can. You know, I don't necessarily know the process for her picking the album title, but hard to argue with this one being the title track. You know, this is one of those ones that she's storytelling as the wife of Odysseus as he left to take the city of Troy. You know, just a cool, well-written narrative, you know, like we talked about, from a different perspective. Beautiful song. What do you think?
I wrote down that this is another standout track, but I felt like it moves somewhere almost completely different from where the rest of the album kind of lives. And this is the one that I was mentioning earlier that brought up a Led Zeppelin song for me, because there's stretches of it that sound like it could be like a high melodramatics, no winking kind of rock epic, which makes me think of Kashmir by Led Zeppelin.
Yeah.
And it also makes me think of a lot of And You'll Know Us by the Trail of Dead songs.
Ooh, I like that.
Where yeah, somebody is going all out and being very earnest, making something dramatic and like putting their all into it. And like that's something that I feel like is a specialty of the songwriters from Trail of Dead, and it's something that like I hear happening here. Like it's getting serious and it's getting dramatic, but like there's no there's nothing there that's gonna let up and tell you like they're not being serious, like they're being serious.
Right.
Like it sounds good.
No, totally. I mean, this one, yeah, it's awesome. And I'm running out of words on it, but no, it's great track. Great to identify with as the title of the album. And then what's the last one we're on to here? Nature of Dust.
Now you did write, yeah, you wrote that one down, but I didn't see it on my copy. So is it like a bonus track?
Let me look into that, because I was wondering about that.
Yeah, because so when you were listening to it, does it come up after I Speak Because I Can?
It does, yeah.
Interesting. I wonder what's up with my copy then.
I don't think this is an album with low points, So I'm not trying to say it in that way, but like, after I Speak Because I Can, the song, it's kind of like, all right, let's have a little song to end on. Nothing spectacular, but a good song nonetheless.
Interesting.
Yeah. Let's see. Is it not on Spotify?
Well, while you pull that up, I had something written down that kind of addressed like the entire album
Sure.
and my feelings on it. And it was kind of it was like an odd metaphor that I thought of when I listened to it. And I wrote down that this album sounds like somebody who had watched like people like Sufjan Stevens and the Decemberists and Fleet Foxes and some other, like various other female solo acts of that era. It felt like she had watched them run the musical version of the American Gladiators like Eliminator finale, and then had memorized like which doors that Blaster and Turbo were sitting behind. It was the only way that I could describe it. It's like she saw where they went wrong, or she saw what kind of it seems like it's a genre that kind of infamously people bounced off of very quickly and like found things not to like about it. But it sounds like she saw those things and she heard those things and didn't do them. It's almost a addition by subtraction. Like there's kind of
she kind of learned the lessons of her forefathers, so to speak.
Yeah, but it's interesting because it wasn't, it's not like this album came out in 2020 or or something like that, where we've already gone through that cycle and people have already been like, oh, I don't have a beard anymore and I'm not wearing flannel and wearing a straw hat and like playing my mandolin in this band anymore.
Somebody
like,
get me an IPA.
This is right. Yeah, this is like 10 seconds after all that stuff has happened. Right. And like, I don't know if it's consciously or not, but she's already avoiding the things that like, personally, if I go back and I put on the Fleet Foxes album that has like White Winter Hymnal on it, like it's a good song, but like I'm kind of like, it makes me go like this. Like, what was I? What were we thinking?
This was a time and place, yeah. Whereas this one's a little bit more, timeless, perhaps. Yeah.
So it's almost like especially hearing this now and not having heard it back then, like it feels like you've like pulled something out of the era where you're like, it could have gone this direction. Like, what could have been if everybody was more Laura Marling and less Mumford and Sons.
Yeah.
Right.
No, agreed. And I mean, I think to your point of like kind of that, whether it's learning from the material that was out by then that, was, maybe not getting the reception people wanted, or if it was just kind of, Ethan Johns and her, being, kind of intelligent about the music itself, they did a great job of, this is really what the genre could be.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't know about you, but like between that and like, it's not the kind of music I'm like usually seeking out to listen to on my own. It's not something I don't like, but it's, there's only so much music we can listen to out there.
Yeah, no, I mean, if we're kind of moving on to, our ending thoughts on the album itself, like I definitely enjoyed it. Definitely it wasn't a burden to put on 5 or 6 times. But no, coming into it, it's like, this isn't, Patti Smith was probably the closest thing I've had in a year to stuff like this, and that's not even that close. So, no, it was a good, but I enjoyed good departure,
more than I expected.
Yep. Yeah. No, when I heard, oh, English folk, oh, goody. But no, definitely, musically more dynamic than I expected, and the lyrics on it were great. Enough to catch our attention. So, no, a good one.
Yeah, and again, a big thanks to our resident expert / hacker, Rick Quinn, for kind of you know, before he got his info to us, a lot of how I looked at this album was being framed around, you know, kind of that time frame of uh, you know, Obama era Americana folk that was coming up. But you know, he kind of grabbed our heads and and moved it this way and said, "Don't look at that. Look at this.
Right.
Like, don't look at Americana, but look at like Celtic folk music." And
Dylan and Joni
uh,
Mitchell and
yeah, and that was very helpful to getting at the you know, getting at what the album's really about. So on our kind of final rundown, like, was there anything that this album reminded you of? And I can do, you know, I can read over the ones that I wrote down if
yeah, no, like I said, I mean, you know, there's definitely some of that English tone to it reminds me a little bit of like the Jethro Tull, more folky stuff. Just that
yeah,
English
okay.
fantasy. Obviously, like different vocals. She's not singing about bodily fluids like Ian Anderson likes to do. So a little more mature, but yeah, it definitely kind of reminds me of that a little bit. You know, I definitely see the Dylan and Joni Mitchell stuff. You know, as Rick identified, hard not to. But yeah, no, it definitely stood out as pretty unique to me.
Yeah, so some things that I wrote down that kind of floated in and out of mind as I listened to it, that I may not be able to elaborate on too much, but you know, you can kind of either go and listen to them or figure it out. But I wrote down a band called Broadcast. I heard Fleetwood Mac. I heard Chelsea Wolfe. There's a band called Best Coast, which is Bethany Cosentino's band, aka the lady who does the Bandsplain theme song. All right. And then again, like anything this acoustic forward always brings me back to the Sue George songs from Life Aquatic.
Ooh, yeah.
Where he's covering Bowie all acoustic and singing in Portuguese. And you know, it's never a bad time to throw that on.
No, that's a great little soundtrack there.
And then you know, when I saw the question, what did this remind you of? It felt weird, but because the album reminded me of it twice, I felt like I had to talk about it. But oddly enough, there's two specific things on this album that reminded me of the Star Wars show Andor. So the lyrics on "Hope in the Air" reminded me of Stellan Skarsgård character Luthen, who has a kind of a famous monologue at the end of that show about how he's creating hope, basically a new hope, maybe. he's creating, you know, something for the future that he's convinced he's not going to be able to see, and that he's sacrificing things for like a better time that he's not going to be able to survive, or that's going to happen on such a long timeline that he's not going to be there. You know, there's hope for other people, but there's no hope for him.
Wow, I like that. Yeah.
And then also the title of her debut album, "Alas, I Cannot Swim," brought up Andy Serkis's character Kino Loy from that, which I won't spoil the whole thing, but not being able to swim is kind of a big moment in that. That show.
It plays a factor for sure with his character.
So what were like your initial thoughts, and what was your opinion after living with the album for about a week?
Yeah, you know, my initial thought when we pulled this one and started reading the description was like, I'm glad 25-year-old Phil isn't having, or Helio isn't having to review this one. You know, because I probably wouldn't be as open-minded and, you know, well-versed in such things. But at the same time, like I really enjoyed it. I was looking forward to kind of embracing another new artist, new style, and really kind of one of the joys of this project.
Yeah, I was going to say one of the kind of reasons for the podcast existing is this kind of thing. And it's a reason that we're not going through the list and picking our own, because
It'd be easy to do Dark Side of the Moon,
yeah, it'd be easy, it'd be easy to pull out Ziggy Stardust, and behind the scenes info here, I spun the random number generator just to make sure it worked before the episode, and we did pull Ziggy Stardust's number while doing that. So we both had kind of a what could have been moment there. But there's nothing to say it might not happen again. It is a random number generator, and part of being random is that something like that could
After
happen.
this week, we got a 1 in 498, chance of landing on it.
Yeah, it keeps getting better. The chance keeps getting better the more you
exactly.
go, right? Yeah. So for me, actually, my kind of initial thought and thought a week later isn't too crazy different. I like the album is a product of its time and kind of scene that transcends a lot of what I usually hear and what I don't like from albums like this. But like I mentioned before, like if you had told me that this came out in 2018 and it's somebody who was kind of retrospectively working on the idea of new folk,
the second wave of it,
yeah, like there's a lot of, like we talked about earlier, like there's a lot of artists doing the dark synth John Carpenter type thing, and I feel like that is a group of people who really benefit from being able to look back and say like, oh, this is what people loved about this, and I'm going to pick the I'm picking the cookie dough chunks out of the ice cream, and I'm putting those all together for people.
Well said. And baking a nice cookie.
Yeah, like but it feels prescient in what kind of sounds and words are being put down that makes it feel more it feels more durable than the other music and bands I was talking about.
I would agree 100%.
Yeah. Will you be listening again after this week?
I don't think.
See, this is where we get.
Yeah, this is truth time, right?
Yeah.
I don't necessarily think I'll be seeking it out. One thing that had dawned on me though is that my daughter is kind of a aspiring singer songwriter. Idolizes Taylor Swift. And for me,
Okay.
One thing I want to do is expose her to more female artists and, show her that, yeah, like Taylor's awesome. Glad you have a role model, but like, what about this style? What about this one? So I can definitely see it's something I play for her. For me, if it comes up on like, the DJX Spotify thing, like I'm not skipping it, but I'm probably going to be so busy for the next couple of years picking out an album of the week.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think I'm going to go back to this one.
And it's, I mean, and back to a comment I made earlier, like we really do only have so many hours in the week. Like, a lot of my time listening is like commuting.
Yep.
So I put this album on like, the noise canceling headphones while commuting, and that's like a really good time to be able to concentrate on it. But, the question of will you be listening again after this week has to be, before we give our answer, it has to be taken in that context of like what we get, like literally like what we get to listen to in a week is it's difficult to slot in anybody's albums into these things.
Right.
So I don't know that I will. If it comes up or if it strikes me, which, I'm not gonna be shocked if it happens, like I'll put it on. But the thing that I do want to put on the calendar sometime is to listen to her albums that come after this and kind of see where she's gone. And like maybe maybe I can get Rick to make me a playlist or something of like, can you tell me like what are the
Post this album.
what's the tracks or what's the album I should listen to from after here to like kind of figure out like what she's up to.
Yeah.
Because like even just looking at like the album covers and stuff and names, I'm like, that looks like it got interesting.
Yeah, I mean, in thinking about it, like I think we forget 2010 was now 15 years ago. She's put out quite a bit of stuff since then. She's grown up substantially since then too. So yeah, it would be interesting actually to hear a little bit more of what she's done. But yeah, like, is this album going to be on repeat? Probably not. But I might, go for Devil's Spoke when I need a little upbeat, type vibe, and Katy Perry's not quite cutting it.
There you go. And so we're going to flip the order of the last two questions we usually do on the kind of overall album thoughts here, because one of them I think we want to talk more about. But so lastly, are there any like favorite moments from the album that you've got?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like I said, Devil's Spoke, is definitely going to be one I hope kind of pops up. Goodbye England.
Maybe we could make like a Spotify. Maybe we can make like a Spotify playlist of like one or two songs from each album we hit that were like, these were the ones we liked.
Well, the song from the Patti Smith album I like though isn't on Spotify, so right away it's an incomplete list.
Oh, you're a big fan.
Yeah, me and Kanye and Elon. I think Devil Spoke, and then Speak Because I Can. Both of those are great. Even What He Wrote. If I had to pick like top 3 moments on there.
Mm-hmm. I also wrote down Devil Spoke. That's a major track. I love that one. Like I said, like the riffing and the cinematic feel of Alpha Shallows, I really dug. And then the last one I wrote down was like Darkness Descends has a jauntiness and like a driving groove, like a literal like driving your car groove. Like, that sounds like it should be, if somebody's doing like the Gran Turismo replay camera of me driving on a sunny day, like that should be the song.
There you go.
That should be the song that's on there. If you're doing that and like the camera's like looking in on my window and I'm like smiling, like put that on.
That's a nice image. I like that.
Yeah. Okay. So the last question out of these that we had was, is this properly ranked? And the reason that we kind of pulled this question out of the segment is because we want to kind of expand on it because so this album came out in 2010, and the Enemy article of the 500 greatest albums of all time is published in 2013.
Mm-hmm.
So looking at those two facts and looking at where it lands at 263 is not low on the list. No. And this is a newer album. I wish I had looked a little more at like where other new-ish albums are falling, but like I said, 263 is not low, and this is a very new album. So I guess, again, like we said last week, like it's hard this early in the journey to say if something is properly ranked, but I guess I want to expand the question out to like, how long does an album need to like cool off and or transcend its own kind of context before you can really put a tag on it that says this is great?
Yeah. Maybe that's kind of some of the inherent nature in trying to quantify art, is that, we want to place these number values on things so quickly. But, to say, and that there's 262 albums that are better, and there's, 230 that are worse, but still worthy of top 500, I mean,
look at you, Harvard.
Yeah, I know. Right.
Assuming you got that right. I don't know.
But yeah, I mean, I think it's early. I think it's soon enough. I think, in this instance specifically, like 3 years is probably ample time to be able to walk away from something. You're not in the first 6 months of, this is the album at this point in my life that, I needed. You can walk away from it and say like, yeah, this still stands up. This is still good. We're talking about it 15 years
Mhm.
later. But, something like, say, the Oscars can be such a rear view mirror
Yeah, that's
sometimes,
something
like where
we
it's
yeah,
like, well,
that
maybe 5 years, from now, we should be voting on what came
yeah.
out this year.
That's kind of an infamous award
Right.
for this situation where you look back and we say like, this beat this?
Right. And then, sometimes there are albums that come out that, from day one are changing things, or that they will
Mhm.
have lasting impact. Um, like it's a completely different context, but like the first Van Halen album, when everybody started hearing Eddie Van Halen, like, okay, guitar's changing now. It's
Yeah.
evolving. This pretty early on, we know it's going to be on every house party, every radio, and everybody's
Mhm.
going to be trying to emulate this guy for the next 100 years.
Yeah, there are occasionally, tracks and albums that that get the critical and the general consensus of like, oh, we just, like somebody just did something important.
Right.
Like, and it's something else when like everybody can tell, you know which is a lot. It's a lot harder to do something like that right now, with kind of, everything goes on streaming. The cycle of what's new and what's cool is much much faster.
Yeah.
um, Apparently for everybody other than Kendrick Lamar putting down an epic diss track on Drake. um, that kind of that kind of that it's like the exception that proves the rule. Like, when was the last time a song like Not Like Us happened, where, I'm pretty sure it came out before the, kind of the informal competition of Song of the Summer.
Mm-hmm.
It stuck around hard, and presumably he's going to do it at the Super Bowl tomorrow. So it's, you know that would be one of those things for this year. But like, how often does something like that happen anymore?
Well, and the interesting thing is too, like, even if he doesn't do it, we're still going to be talking about it on Monday and playing it because he didn't do it.
I mean,
It's kind of like,
yeah, we're talking about it. Yeah, we're talking about it now. Yeah, exactly. If he doesn't do it, the plays are going to go up and up
right.
again on
Oh,
Spotify.
I can't believe you didn't play that. Oh man, it's such a good song.
He's already walking home with, X amount of Grammys for it. Like,
Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
like, if
pretty amazing.
I would say, like, if you and I were to have our own publication, blog, or whatever, and we were doing a top X amount, yeah, I think it'd probably be safe to put a little distance on, like, we're in 2025, maybe nothing released after 2022. Like, I think 3 years is
Yeah.
probably enough to get a picture of where it stands in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, do you think the NME list would be like substantially better if they had added a real deadline to the list and said like only 2008 or 2010 backwards?
That's an interesting
Like,
yeah.
do you think the list gets do you think the list gets hurt by, by something like, we mentioned, like there's the Arctic Monkeys
Right.
album AM, like came out a couple months,
Mhm.
and like, they're on there, but like, what album I want to see what albums are sitting, like what albums came in at like 501 through 510, and like, how would a NME contributor feel when they looked at those 10 albums and then they looked at Arctic Monkeys AM,
Right.
which we're not making any kind of judgment call on. We're only mentioning it because that's the newest album on the list. Like,
Yeah, but I think
you
you can
there would
definitely,
be anything?
because of like the voters themselves, there's definitely going to be things like recency bias involved, where it's kind of like, this one's a lot
Mhm.
fresher, it has more impact for me. oh man, I can't get enough of this album. And, it's hard to, you know, objectively say that X is better than Y when you have, this attachment currently going on to something. So yeah, something recent like Arctic Monkeys AM, it's probably going to get more points than it would now.
Yep. Okay, and to expose ourselves to the same mental damage, I would say, what's like the newest kind of albums that you think that you can put the great tag on and
Yeah,
not feel like you've got a big fear of being wrong?
totally. I didn't want to make a whole list of like 100 of them, but like, a couple that came to mind was like some of the more recent Kendrick Lamar stuff. A lot of his great work is after 2013. Damn, Pimp a Butterfly, those would be up there. Kamasi Washington, his album The Epic, is one of my favorite things probably put out in the last 15 years. Like, I'd have that
Yeah,
on there.
I remember you recommended that to me, and I think it was a time where I had a very, very long night drive ahead of me
Mhm.
with like nothing else going on, and like we listened to like that entire thing while driving around at like pitch black night, and like yeah, I remember having the feeling of like I'm like again like I'm listening to like I immediately could tell like I'm listening to something important.
Right. And, it's all kind of subjective, of course, but yeah, I mean, it's like a tremendous album. And, um, maybe the guy doesn't even get enough love for it as it is. Um, another one that popped into my head, we talked about earlier was that I Love You, Honey Bear by Father John Misty. Um, you know, again, of talking about top 500, yeah, it deserves a spot in there. And then, just kind of
Yeah.
paying a little love to the metal in me. Magma by Gojira. Really just a huge album, kind of cementing that new wave of death metal, but also kind of like breaking into the more mainstream consciousness of metal, kind of the way Metallica did 25 years ago with like the Black Album. Magma kind of did that a little
Yeah.
bit more with like death metal, where it's like, okay, you can start hearing this stuff now, crossing over a little bit because it's so good. And then one you turned me on to recently was Sunbather by Deaf Heaven, and just a masterpiece of music from beginning to end. And it might
Yeah,
not ever make a top 500 list in this
that's
context.
kind of the word for it. Yeah. And I mean I think it depends on the kind of the the group of people that you're asking, but I do recall that there was kind of a real groundswell around Sunbather when it first came out, and that was another one where it may have been a smaller corner of people, but those corner of people who were listening to stuff like this, like it seemed like they immediately recognized, like, this is a great album.
Oh, totally. Yeah, I mean, the first couple of times I've listened to it, it's just been one of those like, I can't believe what I'm hearing, but
Yeah.
so good. Yeah.
So for me, you'd mentioned that Kendrick had a run of albums. I thought about, and it almost sounds implausible talking about it, but I don't feel like I'm wrong. But there's 1 to 3 albums each for Kendrick Lamar, The Weeknd, and Tyler the Creator, and all 3 of them seem to be on like back to back, or possibly one, skipping over one, that they're on album runs that are kind of unbelievably good. And I think if they were all coming out in an era that wasn't, what we mentioned as being so streaming focused and being so kind of quick, short attention span cycled, I think people could slow down and like really appreciate what those 3 are up to right
Yeah.
now. Like, I feel like those are kind of easy calls for something that we're going to look back on someday and say, oh, that was, especially all of them doing it at the same time. Like that was something else.
A question I want to ask you, and I'm only going to ask
Mhm.
it just to maybe like tease it for another episode. Maybe we can dive into it next week. Because I've had this conversation with people of our age. Where do you stand on modern hip hop versus like 90s hip hop if you had to choose, what you're filling your playlist with? I mean,
Mm,
like I personally, for me, it's as simple as saying like I feel modern hip hop is much better. Um, Not to say that the influence of 90s wasn't important and we couldn't get to where we are today without it, but like what we have now in the finished
yeah,
product is so much better.
it is. And um, especially because, again, like, I was talking about people looking retrospectively and kind of mining out the gold of what they had before. A lot of what's happening right now is, people taking the benefit of technology and the benefit of basically being able to tape study rappers that were around back in the 90s. They're, um, and again, to almost, fly completely off topic, something that it reminds me of is something that reminds me of is skateboarding. Like, not too long ago in skateboarding, if you go look at the videos, like, the most complicated crazy thing you could do is like doing a flip trick onto a rail and then riding away like, okay.
Yeah.
But now that kids have grown up with those videos, there's people who are amateurs where if you sent them back in time and put them down on video, they would be considered the greatest skater of that era.
Right.
But it's about it's about progression. Like, those kids grew up seeing how to do this and that it was possible. And you know and with music, you have the added benefit of having technology becoming cheaper and becoming digitized, as being, like, recording workstations become part of your computer instead of something that you need to
By studio
go
time
to
and
a studio. Yeah, or even you don't have to go to a somewhere that has an expensive fast computer. Like, you can do this on your home computer now. You can get a MIDI controller for $20 that's going to be able to control the exact same sets of synths and sounds that people in the 90s had to drive their car somewhere and, you know push a cable into a Korg synthesizer to be able to get the exact same sound that, me and you might be able to go to the internet and download now.
It's just a virtual
So
software. Exactly.
so I mean, yeah, this is a long ways around of saying that I agree. Like, if I have to take one or the other, like, I'm taking what we have now. But I mean, it'd be a hard choice because I I don't ever want to get rid of Snoop Dogg's Doggy Style.
Right. Exactly. It's not to say that there isn't.
That's the Night at the Opera of hip hop and rap.
Right.
Like, if I don't have you know if I don't have Bohemian Rhapsody and I don't have Shark, the first track from that I love just as much, like, what am I gonna do?
Yeah, it's true. They're important as well. They just have a different place.
Yeah. One other album that I wanted to note as one that I'm slapping the great tag on in a short amount of time is the newest album from And You'll Know Us by the Trail of Dead, which is called Bleed Here Now, and it came out in 2022. And I don't really know if it's ever going to get the kind of attention that I feel like it deserves and that would open people's eyes to it and to what they've become after being one of those indie rock bands that kind of disappeared into the wilderness for a while. And for them, it was a long while. It's like literally 20 years and maybe 8-9 albums that most people is nowhere on their radar. And even me, who's a big fan, about half of them, are not something that I've listened to twice. But where they got to after all of those in this album, Bleed Here Now. So I said it came out in 2022, and it's been like hands down easy my favorite album of anything that's come out since then. It's kind of a big album, so like if you want to grab sample tracks from it, try either Penny Candle, Golden Sail, or Millennium Actress to kind of get the feel of what it is. And then again, like coincidentally related to something we talked about earlier too, but that album is mixed in it's mixed quadrophonically, where it's supposed to be heard on two different stereo systems, which basically gives you like two front, two back. But as far as I've researched and tried to find, I don't know how or where to get a hold of the like two different copies of what you're supposed to be hearing. So on the long shot that anybody is listening to this who may know that, like please email the indie500podcast@gmail.com or get at me on Blue Sky. I think I'm Intel and Sebastian there. And please tell me how to get the quadrophonic copy of Bleed Here Now. Please do.
Oh, I would love that.
Yeah.
No, that is an awesome album. But yeah, kind of, off the beaten path, maybe, just because it's a band that has been around for a while, but damn good work of art.
Yeah. And, I don't blame people for not coming to a band's, 10th album after their big hit album that everybody was on, and not being super excited to tune in and figure out, oh boy, what do they do now? But they really brought it back, like, and it's not even bringing it back. Like, I think they've distilled what they've been trying to do for so long.
Finally got it
into
dialed in.
It's what it should have been if it was, I could talk about their kind of arc during this time frame, and maybe I'll get to someday, but yeah.
Any others on there
So
that you can think of, like other albums?
I did want to say Tame Impala's Currents, which is 2015, so it's not as much of a reach. I think we've had enough time, and I think enough people have said about that one that it's big and important.
Yeah.
In another genre for electronica, I would say the Justice album. That's I don't think it has a title. It just has a symbol. It's a cross. That is about as close as you're ever going to get to having another like Daft Punk Homework. And again, that's one that came out in 2007. So again, not a big reach calling it great, but I also think because I'm saying, I just compared it to, basically Jesus within the realm of like house and electronic music. Like, because I'm saying it goes up there on like the Mount Rushmore for that genre, like I think that's that's a notable thing to say. Like, that album is capital G great.
Yeah,
like,
I mean, you're definitely not underselling that one.
Yeah, and one thing I wanted to say is, because a lot of people have probably heard that one and they know that it's great, but I don't think a lot of people know that there is there's like kind of during the same time frame for them, they made a soundtrack for a fashion runway show. And I'm gonna look it up real quick so I get it right, but yeah, maybe I won't. It'll take too long. But basically, they made a it's called Planisphere, all one word if you're looking it up. But they made the soundtrack for a fashion brand's runway show, and it's I don't know the exact runtime, but I want to say it comes in at like 12 minutes, and it's like 3 tracks that run together. And it's basically like getting another like huge chunk of the Cross album that I don't think a lot of people know exists, but like, you know, it's like finding again, it's like finding more books of the Bible. Like
Let's see. Yeah, Justice
like
was
if you
revealed to have done a mix for the Dior Home Summer 2009 fashion show, much like Daft Punk did for Louis Vuitton in 2007. The track, now known as
Oh, there you go.
Planisphere, was released in 4 parts on the band's MySpace page.
There you go. Yeah, and you know, and originally because it was put out like that, like I think it was hard to find, but it is on Spotify now, I believe, as its own thing. So check that out.
Nice.
If you know, if you haven't heard Cross, go listen to Cross. If you've heard Cross and you know what I'm talking about, go listen to Planisphere. And if you've listened to Cross and Planisphere, we're best friends.
I was gonna say, yeah, you should probably hang out with that person sometime.
Yeah. So a final segment I want to deploy. It's kind of in lieu of a game this episode. But as people may or may not know, our host Helio is a real life, bona fide top chef. And this is not a fake ad read for like Colonel Morrissey. Like this is I'm speaking the true truth here. He really is. But he has served edible delights from such great heights to a true gallery of who's who over his lifetime. And so I wanted to now consult with his alter ego, his culinary Superman to our music list Clark Kent's. And I wanted to ask him the question, for this week's album, Laura Marling's I Speak Because I Can, what culinary dish would you pair with this album? And it's a segment that I'm calling, regrettably for both mental image reasons and also does not work in audio format reasons. I'm calling it Meet Me in the Bathroom. And that is MEAT. Meet Me in the Bathroom. So without further ado, I want to hear what food goes along with Laura Marling's I Speak Because I Can.
Absolutely. Now, I'll let you know that after I went to the bathroom, I did wash my hands to prepare this meal. So, you know, no sanitation concerns should be noted here.
He's a pro.
Totally.
I told you, people, he's a pro.
So this week, you know, kind of finding that middle ground between a little bit of English flavor, but also a little bit of folk, a little bit of, you know, kind of down-to-earth cooking. So went with a grilled cider glazed pork chop, some English cheddar grits, and roasted Brussels sprouts with dried cranberries and toasted walnuts. Yeah, and just, you know, we're going to put the recipe and walkthrough up on our Substack later today, so you can read it all there. But yeah, just a couple of little tidbits. You know, pork, it's one of those things, if you haven't done it before, try brining your pork. And what that means is you're just putting the chops in a solution of water, sugar, salt, for about 6 to 8 hours, and that's going to help retain moisture in it. So you get that juicy pork chop, kind of no matter how much you cook it. You're not going to dry it out. It's going to be flavorful, still have that moisture in it, make it worthwhile. English cheddar, you know, there's definitely a lot of different ways you can go with this. They have like a rustic red that you'll find in a lot of stores, but one I tried actually earlier in the week was this one called Cotswold. It's a cheddar that actually has a lot of herbs infused to it, like chives, green onions, things of that nature, to give you a really big flavor. So you put that in some grits, you know, add some butter, some milk, and grits, man, you're gonna have a good time. Lastly, you know, the Brussels sprouts, because you got to have a little bit of vegetable in there with, you know, something that rich. One tip I can definitely say is, you know, if you're cooking them, don't just throw them straight into the oven, you know, with oil and salt. Give them a little poach in, you know, hot water for about a minute. Pull them out, let them cool, then season them up, pop them in the oven. Add your cranberries and walnuts when they come out of the oven. It's going to be great. And then lastly, that cider glaze you're talking about, if you do it right, that's going to be like licking the plate. You're just doing a cider glaze with apple cider vinegar, kind of gives it a nice sweet and sour. It's going to cut through pork, kind of cut through the grits, give you a nice sauce. Like I said, we'll have the recipe up on the Substack. I hope you guys enjoy.
I really hope I can try it.
Yeah.
Once it goes up, I'm gonna look and I'm gonna try and collect those ingredients.
Well,
because that sounds.
Oh yeah.
So.
I mean, grits.
So
grits with enough cheese in it, man. One of those things I could eat any day. I mean, it's like rice, goes with anything, and yeah, easy to make.
So before we exit our culinary segment, I wanted to show you something. I'm putting it in the chat right now, and I'm curious if you've seen this already, or if I have just cost you $100. And if you could describe, if you're pulling it up right now, describe what you're seeing.
Well, what I'm seeing is a mixed blessing, because this item apparently is sold out at the moment. But
oh shit! I'm so
no, it's okay. Like I said, it's a mixed blessing.
Oh my god! Oh my
okay.
god! It did not say that yesterday.
Oh, okay, no worries. So it is a Primus branded frizzle fry skillet by Lodge, who makes wonderful cast iron products. Lodge, hit us up if you're looking for a podcast sponsor. But yeah, I have not seen this before, and holy crap, would I be happy to get one of these one day. Yeah, I mean, I use cast irons for burgers, for chops, for baking, for just about anything. I mean, if it's not a wok, I'm using a cast iron. So this I'm going to be monitoring with great interest, my young apprentice.
We're not a video podcast just yet, but I literally have my head in my hands. It did not say sold out yesterday.
That's okay. Well, here's the good news. It looks like it says on here, this is a pre-order item and expected to ship on or around April 4th. So they could be making more. They could open up more. And, honestly, there's probably going to be people that buy it just to flip it on eBay or Amazon or something like that. So
that's
I won't say never,
so
but definitely going to be keeping an eye on it.
If you want to treat this, if you love us enough and you want to treat this podcast like an OnlyFans or something, and you want to,
it's only,
and you want to buy us present.
Right.
If you want to buy us presents, so we'll say thank you to you or something.
This is our OnlyFans plea. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. keep an eye out for the Primus, apparently limited edition frizzle fry skillet by Lodge Cast Iron.
Amazing.
And we'll put the link to that in the episode description too, so you can see it and feel as bad as I do for not getting it to Brady before it's sold out, or to getting it to Helio before it's sold out.
Though, I will say, that's going to be the most random band merchandising I've seen in quite a while. But I do love it. I love the outside the boxes of it. So they apparently know who they're marketing quite well.
I might have kept that to myself if I knew it was sold out, because I know it hurt you.
Nah, it's okay. No, like I said,
right.
If it's meant to be, it'll be.
All right. Wow. We had so much fun today that I almost forgot about this, and I literally did forget about it. But we get to spin the random number generator one more time and get an album.
Nice. 3.5 hours later, we are here.
So the last two episodes, I've spun it and then told you what we got. Do you want to spin it this time, or do you want me to go again?
You've spun pretty good so far.
Okay.
But I'm watching you. If it starts getting a little suspect, then maybe we'll see.
I did make a comment that I was making a joke earlier that I was accidentally using the official Lilith's Fair brand random number generator, because we seem to have landed on two different female singer songwriters.
Hey,
in a
good
row.
chance we're gonna do it again this week too. So let's
listen. If we do, I'm not stopping.
Nah.
like we said, like that's a major part of this podcast is getting into stuff that we otherwise wouldn't have
The
checked
discovery.
out. Yeah, but you know what? Why don't you throw me on the Metal Gear music again as I spin and
Yes.
find out what we got. All right, so here we go. Getting it up. All right, I'm touching the button. I'm watching the numbers fly around, and it has landed. And this had to happen sometime, but I'm gonna tell you
Is it
first
number
that we have
69?
landed.
Or 420? Which one?
Nice, but no, I had totally forgot that we're gonna eventually hit a 420 episode.
Yeah.
But no, we have landed within. Oh no, okay. I fucked up.
Uh-oh.
I'm being so dramatic here. I was gonna say we've landed within the top 10, but I forgot to put my maximum number at 500.
What was your maximum number at?
10.
Oh.
So I landed on number 8. We would have been reviewing the Pixies' Doolittle, which would have been very fun.
Okay. Well, in the spirit of following the rules, tell me when you're ready for the music.
We will re-roll. All right, hit me with the music again. Okay, this time rolling 1 through 500, unless we land on 263 or 435, yes. I believe. Yes. Okay, here we go. The numbers are rolling.
Big money.
Rolling.
Big
Rolling.
Money.
No Emmys. No Emmys.
He's a new Primus pan.
There we go. We are at number 4. Oh, that was perfect. We're at number 468.
Ooh.
On the enemy list. So I'm hitting Control F now. I don't know if do you have the list up as well?
Doing so right now.
Oh, very interesting. Okay. So the album we've landed on is The Shins' Shoots Too Narrow. All right. So we're still a little bit in the folk region. We're getting more into rock. We've, inevitably landed on a sub pop band. So this one was released in 2003. Let me see the track list here. See if
Shoots Too Narrow.
Yeah, so it's not the one that has the Garden State song.
Okay.
Which is, possibly a blessing or a curse. But I've definitely heard this band. I don't know that I've heard this album.
I have a feeling because of the time when we were hearing a lot of stuff like this from just people we hung out with, that we will recognize it, but maybe kind of one of those, oh, I didn't know this was them kind of things.
That's a good point. There was 2003. It probably would have been found and then stuck with these people, but there was definitely a scene of people in our lives at that time that I'm trying to describe this without literally saying what their relationship to us was, but basically, these are not people that we would have been hanging around on our own. But they became like a welcome part of our lives, and they were maybe younger people than us who were trying had a different scene they were in on. But yeah, like a lot of this kind of music probably ended up in our sphere through them.
Yeah, exactly. For all the metal and Dillinger and things we sent their way, we definitely got some indie influence and seeing back our way, and some occasional crossover bands in there too.
Yeah. So yeah, very interested. I don't have my key. I don't have my key in the nuclear sub. I'm not turning on this one. How about you?
No, let's all right. Let's do it.
So, and then interestingly, again, like kind of far back on the list, we have not cracked the top 250 at any point so far.
Yeah, that won't come until like season 14.
Yeah, you're gonna have to chill with us for a while.
Exactly.
Let's scroll up and down the list a little bit. Oh my. So nearby at 474 is an album that I literally just told you to listen to a track from yesterday. A band called Fuck Buttons, Tarot Sport.
Yeah.
An album I love. Number 472, which is shockingly low for this, but number 472 is Smashing Pumpkins' Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness.
472?
472, which is
Did they not release it
very
in the UK?
interesting. We'll try to get an explanation on that.
Yeah.
471 is MGMT's Oracular Spectacular, the one that broke them big. Number 470 is Kanye West's Graduation.
Nice.
466, somebody who came up on this podcast, the Wu-Tang Clan's The W. Number 464 is Kings of Leon, Because of the Times. So may have been kind of talked around on this episode as well.
Man, it really just goes to show you the depth of this list when you name off those albums.
All of these guys are all of these albums are in the back of the bus.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, number 462 is Metallica's Master of Puppets.
Wow.
Yeah.
A little metal representation there.
Yeah. So, all right. Another fun episode lined up. A mystery revealed.
Mystery revealed.
Okay. Final question. Who's going to win the Super Bowl? If they're here with us this late into the episode,
they're sleeping anyway.
They're gonna listen to us talk about anything. So.
That's true. God bless them.
Let's talk Super Bowl.
I think Kansas City wins, but I want Philly to win. I want Saquon Barkley to go absolutely bonkers in the game and win the MVP, and capping off just a cool season for him. But I think it goes back to Kansas City for 3 in a row.
Yeah, there was an era where people said don't bet against Touchdown Tom. And for better or worse, it feels like we have returned to that era. So I'd put my chips on Kansas City, but I'm right there with you. Like, I feel like I have a personal investment in the kind of shitty storyline that's been going on of the devaluing of running backs. So, Saquon's campaign this year has been, it's something against that. Like they're not being paid what they should. Even if you don't think they're as big of a part of the game anymore.
Yeah.
They're still undervalued.
No, I mean, exactly.
Now,
look where they're at.
Yeah. And now that you've got somebody like Saquon, and others that were kind of breaking out this year from the position, like, I hope they get paid.
Is it too selfish to think that there's got to be a good Always Sunny in Philadelphia run that comes out of the Eagles winning the Super Bowl?
I bet you there.
There's bound to be a storyline.
They've already had some classic episodes where, like, I think there's one where they're like trying out to be on the Eagles. And things like that.
I think Frank drops acid in the parking lot and gets trapped in a portable toilet.
Yeah, so you're that one. So we didn't have one. At least I didn't have one teed up. But is this episode dedicated to anybody?
After talking about Ozzy and the effects of Parkinson's, I just like to dedicate it to my mom, who's also battling Parkinson's, and it's a terrible disease, and wouldn't wish it upon my worst enemy. So this one's for her.
Yep. I've had my life directly touched as well by Parkinson's, so I feel you. And again, just like we were talking about Mr. G last week, obviously for you, but also for me, your mom's somebody who has had the butterfly effect on my life. not to reveal too much again, but me and you went through a long stretch of school where our houses almost became second houses for each other. If we weren't, if we were hanging out somewhere, if it wasn't one place, it was the other place. And you would walk to my house and wake me up before school. So, our lives and our families are intertwined. So,
Definitely.
I feel this one. I feel this one as well.
Cheers to that, man. Well,
Cheers
let's go on a happy note. Let's play that theme one more time.
And some of this list is kind of absurd. And Patty Smith, she used the N-word. And it's a podcast and you will love it. It's the Indy 500.
Beautiful.